Another day, another discourse. Welcome back, everyone, to the second episode of Drivers Discourse, a podcast featuring intense discussions on burning topics in video games, old and new. This time, we're going to be talking about difficulty in video games. And for this discussion, I'm joined by fraufraw, Moxie, and Retrage. What's up, guys? How do we want to tackle
Hello.
this? This is such a loaded topic, isn't it?
Mm. Let's first say what games aren't hard. Silksong is number one not hard game.
Getting right to it, are we?
Not
Yeah.
hard. Oh, you know what? I can't even say that because I haven't played the game. So
No,
you know
no,
what?
yeah.
Let me retract that statement. I'll leave it for those who played the game to talk about it.
I mean, those people that have played the game are probably the least qualified to say whether it's hard or not. To be honest, it's like it it a lot of people that have played Silksong is like the only video game they've played in their life other than maybe Hollow Knight. You know I don't know if the qualifications are sufficient in order to say like whether it's easy or hard for a lot of the people that played it. Um,
Right off the bat.
yeah, no, trust me, guys, this is not
You
part
know
of the
what game
discussion.
is a baby game? A real baby game? Tekken.
Oh, actually, true.
Baby game, bro.
Tekken 8 rate 8 out of 8, mate.
Oh wait,
Um,
wait, wait,
Dude,
wait! Before we
Tekken, you
continue,
just
why don't we discuss why we're bringing this topic? Why
yes.
this is our topic of discussion today?
yeah. I mean, yeah, we goof around for the first couple minutes, see if people still watching, right? All right. Yeah. What are we talking about? What are the substance of this discussion? As I mentioned, it's a very loaded discussion. Difficulty in video games is, and we fully expect this to be not fully synthesized in one part. So this might be a two-parter for those of you that are listening in, and we appreciate everyone that listens into the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Why are we talking about this, right? Something that has bothered me for a long time is people conflating ideas of difficulty with ideas that are related to difficulty, but not necessarily are direct difficulty integration, such as with punishment, such as with accessibility features and things like that, right? And those can contribute to the difficulty of the game overall or how the difficulty of the game is perceived, but those things aren't necessarily difficulty, and there's a bit more nuance to it than a mere term as difficulty, right? So that is kind of what drove the topic for today's discussion. I'm sure all of us have like pretty strong feelings one way or another on what difficulty entails, and that's why we're going to be talking about it in pretty great detail today. Um, yeah. I mean, I think one of the main things that has been bothering me, like beyond just the fact that like obviously punishment and difficulty are not exactly the same thing, is that difficulty is inherently a subjective thing in part at least. And whenever people say like, "Oh, this game is the hardest game I've ever played," like obviously you're building that superlative off of your own personal experience with that game or with that whatever, you know, discipline you did. Like it's not just for a game, it could be for like an exercise or a sport or a task you do in real life or anything else, right? But what bothers me is that people use like opinionated statements as a matter of fact and then also let those things be supported by, oh, look at how many other people say this game is hard, therefore this game is just objectively hard. And I see the word objectively thrown around together with difficult super often. And let's be honest, it's not something that we should get bothered by, all of us, whether someone says this is difficult or not. But I know for sure I'm bothered by it so much, so that's why I wanted to make sure that we did a podcast episode on it. Um, yeah. All right. To get started, I mean, this is one of the primary things that we should get out of the way first. What even is difficulty? Do you guys have any ideas on that?
Right.
before I,
Difficulty.
before we even start on that, I
Right.
think I want to loop back on something that you said where it's like, oh, people will say this subjective opinion, then they'll say like, oh, look at how many people like agree with me like objectively. Then that's a discourse problem. That's not even just related to difficulty. That's just something that people will use like consensus. They will just use like crowd consensus and say like, oh, that's objective. It's like, is it?
Yeah.
Because
That's a
I know a lot of people that will just overlook a lot of like really crazy problems with one thing or another, and then just be like, oh, objectively, this is like the take, right? So
mm-hmm.
anyway,
Yeah,
back to the main question.
yeah, great point. Great point. That is kind of its like own meta discussion right there.
That is its own discussion.
Yeah, Retroid, what's up? What you got? I know you wanted to say something.
Oh no, you know what? On that point, dude, average literacy of your average redditor, right? Right.
Dude,
Discourse skills, guys.
average internet, like terminally online, dude, literacy.
Yeah.
Media literacy
Question
is
mark?
low,
Question
bro.
mark.
Yeah, no, definitely. um, all right, yeah.
How do
So
you define difficulty? Yeah, that is a good question. I haven't written that down on my sheet. Now I'm thinking about it.
yeah, you guys, this episode topic is so loaded. We've been trying to collect notes like over the past couple of days just to make sure that we can actually express our points in a coherent manner. And man, has it been difficult. You see what I did there?
Yeah, well, you say we, you might be speaking French because I haven't been doing anything. I just rocked up.
Yeah, I mean, we got some vibe based podcasters here.
Yeah,
Which
but anyway, I guess I'll start. For me, the most basic, I'll start with the most basic definition. Like the basic definition of like a difficult video game or a difficult encounter in a video game is just like how hard is it to clear? Basically, how hard is it to win? Like how, or I guess another
How
way to say it-
difficult is it to win?
Yeah, I mean-
That's
Or is it-
so
oh my God.
difficult.
It's one of those words that's like you can define it self-referentially. It's hard.
yeah.
But I guess it's like how much do you have to struggle and spend time and like put in effort? What is the amount of effort you have to put in order to succeed? That's pretty much, I think, at a basic level. That's how you define difficulty in anything. But in video games, it's just how much effort you have to put in to like succeed in this combat encounter or whatever.
Yeah, I think.
And
Sorry.
there are different kinds, and that gets into the discussion of there are different kinds of effort that you have to put in. And some of them are like, I think people will say are like more meaningful and more fun to put in and more rewarding to put in than others. And I guess
I like that.
that's where the discussion kind of kicks off.
Meaningful effort.
Yeah.
Writing that down.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And yeah, I mean the self-referential part kind of shows how fundamental difficult the concept of difficulty is in anything in life. It's like, there's some words that are just like so first principles that it's so hard to define it without like just saying the word in the definition, right?
It's almost axiomatic in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it goes to show like how important it is to understand like what exactly this means when we're playing a game or when we're doing anything. Yeah, the effort point is great. I think as well, like not just effort, but like how much like practice or how much reps you have to put in order to get the desired results. Because sometimes a task can be a lot of effort, but you don't need to necessarily put in reps. It's just that effort is required and you can get the desired results like pretty quickly, right? A lot of
Yeah.
people would say, throwing apples inside a blender is like a sliced apples inside a blender is, it's not something you need reps for, right? But
Yeah.
you also got to make sure that the blender just doesn't break when it's like trying to crush the apples or doing whatever you're trying to do with the apples, right? And maybe the blender has a hard time crushing the apples. Maybe it's making a labored effort at crushing them down if they're
You gotta
if they're
think
pretty
about
firm.
like, oh, is the motor powerful enough? Are the blades all dulled out? Like stuff like that. Am I going to fry? Am I going to burn my house down because I'm asking the blender to draw too much power out the wall? Stuff like that.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of people wouldn't consider that to be a difficult task. And yeah, to be fair, you don't really need to put in reps for that. You just throw the
Yeah.
apples inside there. Whereas something like swimming is so simple, right? Swimming involves like pretty coordinated uh motion with a lot of parts of your body, to move forward in the water, right? But a lot of people would say it's difficult because, it requires a lot of
Well,
practice.
you say it like that. It's not actually that simple.
Right, it isn't that simple, is it?
No,
So,
it's not simple. It's pretty complex. There's a reason why I think a lot of parents they want to send their kids to swimming lessons young because we'll get into that later. But because it's
mhm.
hard to learn. I'm pretty sure random tangent. I'm pretty sure my mom doesn't know how to swim, and I don't want to teach her because I know it's gonna be hard.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, you guys, for this episode, we'll be having a whiteboard. It's not visible on the podcast display right now, but those of you that are watching through video will be able to see it since I've transitioned to that scene briefly. But yes, we'll be making use of the whiteboard over the course of the episode to help jot things down and make sure that we can etch them into the stones of our mind. But regardless, yeah. As we can see, right? It's just so hard to like establish like the fundamentals of what difficulty entails, which is why we're just like trying to bounce off ideas right now. And that way we have some direction for what we're going to talk about in the future part of this episode. But yeah, beyond like the effort point or the reps point, do you guys have any other ideas on what entails like difficulty on a fundamental level?
I think that like the end goal part, there's like a big difference between like what the dev end goal is and the player end goal is, right?
Okay.
And like sometimes like those don't match together, especially when the game doesn't communicate very well what its goal, like what the goal is, right? So you can have a dev goal that like the dev wants the players to like reach towards, but then if there's no communication, the difference between the player goal and the dev goal starts to diverge, and then you might have like problems come up which make it difficult, right?
Hmm.
Because like the goals aren't lined up. So with the player is trying to do something totally different, and because the dev it's not the dev intended goal, like they didn't build things to for that goal that the player is trying to do, and then like the player runs into difficulty, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a distinction, right? On like the end goal, there's like the player end goal, whatever the player feels like the goal is, and what the dev's actual goal is, right? And how that like integrates itself into how the player feels. So I think I'd add that distinction
Yeah, that's a
if I
good
were
point.
to add something there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean that's a good tie-in as well to like our specific focus in difficulty in video games, right? And actually, something I want to like emphasize too, and that'll be kind of the cornerstone of the points I make in this episode, is the idea of intentionality in a fighting game. Like the first time I picked up a fighting game, I didn't know what I was doing. I was button mashing, right? And I didn't think fighting games were necessarily hard back then because I was winning and I was just mashing Chun-Li's lightning legs and beating people, right? So I didn't think fighting games were hard. Uh, but over time, as I wanted to like learn more about how they worked and like how to beat people while like actually knowing what I was doing, it's that idea of intentionality, right? You want to press a button, you want to have the intention of pressing that button, but you also want to have the intention of whatever is produced by the game, uh, producing the desired outcome, right? An outcome that lets you have full control over your opponent, over the game, etc. And how like if that intention is able to is able like if that intentionality tied to like the outcome that you want is easy to produce. I hate saying easy here because then I'm just using the word to define what I'm saying. But anyway, if it's easy to produce that intentionality, then we can say, okay, maybe the game is easy, right? But that's not the reality for fighting games, especially in a competitive setting, right? A lot of the times your opponent is doing something that prevents you from like being able to actualize the intent that you had initially. and that can disrupt your intent, or there could be like game system factors, or there could be execution factors, which we'll all touch on through this episode. But point being, if I press the button, like let's say I press crouch medium kick, and that crouch medium kick comes out, it's like I intended for that to come out, right? But if let's say I was trying to do crouch medium kick, fireball, FADC, ultra, or something like that, then it did not come out because of some input overlapping. Like let's say instead of fireball coming out, it came out as a shoryuken, and then the ultra came out as another shoryuken, right? Rather than like the actual ultra, then I messed up, right? But that outcome was possible from those inputs I produced, right? So it's not like I didn't have the intention for the ultra to you had the intention for the ultra to come out, it didn't come out, right? But it was a possibility from what you input, so the game was able to interpret that as what you input and produce the result from that. And a lot of people would see it as you made an input error and not necessarily that the game is bad, right? A lot of people would see like, oh yeah, you made an input error, that's why the game gave you a shoryuken instead of the ultra at the end there. But how about for like, you know, non-competitive games, right? Or even just like another way to look at it is like, how, like, should the game be able to interpret your desired ultra as a shoryuken? And it was the fact that it produced that instead something that adds to like the difficulty element of the game, like execution wise, right? So that's how I've always seen like difficulty, or like one way I've seen it is like the intentionality
all
point.
this fighting game player jargon. You're alienating the freaking
all you need to know
audience,
about
man,
fighting
at the
game
very
viewers and what
start.
fighting games are.
Oh my goodness.
Well,
Actually,
What
medium kick. Oh,
FADC Ultra, dude? What is FADC? What is that?
yeah, that's already difficult, right?
Very difficult, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You're hitting them with the knowledge difficulty gate. How are they supposed to
Dude,
listen to
knowledge
this podcast
checks.
Knowledge checks,
without the
knowledge
knowledge?
Yeah, and that's yet another dimension that we're going to talk about in this episode is the knowledge component, which, you know, we could probably get to that more deeply when we actually get there, but that's something that we want to bring up as well. The ability to gather knowledge, and also the ability to apply the knowledge. That's something that we'll be touching
I
on.
have games where they do a bad job. Oh goodness.
Yeah.
But yeah,
At what point is execution like there's like a fine line between your intentionality and like, oh yeah, like I inputted these things, I wanted this result, and it doesn't happen in the game, right? So
Yeah,
like
the
if
game
we were to
size
give
is
like a
not Burger King
percentage,
anymore, you do not get it your way.
yeah, if we were to give like a percentage of how much execution plays into difficulty, like okay, over the course of like games that you've played, right? Is it execution that is like the most difficult or most commonly difficult encounter that people find in games? What do we think? Is it execution? Is it knowledge? What is the difficult part
You know,
For me,
of
it's
games,
always
or most
decision
common
making.
difficult?
Like I tend to have bad decision making in games. But that's mostly because I think that I have good execution. Just generally speaking, I'm like my execution tends to be very sharp, but um my decision making is terrible. Quite frankly, a lot of the deaths I have in video games are just because I'm like, "Oh, I'm not going to be careful here. I'm just going to run in and try to run it down and be like and get this over with," and then I die.
yeah,
So, um for the most part, I think
Would you say decision making is like for multiplayer games, or just like just in
it's
general?
both. It's both. I'll often like um I'm bad at multiplayer games. I'm bad at fighting games. But oftentimes fighting games is another, well, multiplayer games there's something else as well, but even in multiplayer games I'll like uh I'll make wrong reads, I'll not make reads, and I'll just spam stuff and be super easy to hit. I'll backdash into a corner and then be like, oh, I'm at the wall now. Fun. You know what I mean? I'll just do stuff where like strategically I look back and I'm like, I really could have done this better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ah, common. So I actually think it's important to consider the genre when we talk about like the common difficulty elements
yeah.
in action games. I think okay, the action games I play personally, I think a lot of the time it is the execution. But in puzzle games, there's the execution side. When we say execution, guys, we mean like the ability to make real time performances within that game, like based on whatever like mechanics or controls that game has. So, for example,
Like
actually, mhm,
you will say like, oh, I want to do this specific action. Like
yeah,
I want to fine game example, but I want to send out a Shoryuken or an electric wind god fist, and then your success rate's high. That's good execution, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like actually, a recent example because I just picked up Kirby Air Riders for Switch 2 recently, and I've been thinking about this like for the podcast episode today, like as I woke up. Um, that game has effectively 1.5 buttons in its button scheme, and I say 1.5 because there's one button that does most of the system mechanics, and then there's one more button that is for like one or two specific situations. Um, that game, because you have one button for most of your actions, like it's like the system button, there's a lot of input overlapping that can take place. And the intentionality component of that game is very difficult. But it's like by design, right? Because it's partially a party game. Um, the thing about a game like that is still like a real-time game, so you're making real-time decisions and you have to make real-time performances. When I say performances, I'm just using another word for execution, so I don't say execution. And but I hope it's clear what I'm saying. Like you have to be able to do what you're trying to do, or if you're not trying to do something because you know it's hard to do exactly what you're trying to do, you have to at least do something, right? And it has to result in something happening in the game. So that's like that part, that component. And I think that's like more prevalent in action games. Whereas if you're playing like a puzzle game or a turn-based game, you're not going to have the like performance or like real-time, you know, frame by frame decision making necessarily come up as often, right? It's going to be more so about like your strategy, planning out your moves, uh, decision
Builds.
making, incorporating the knowledge that you've gained over the course of the game, being able to apply it in the right situations. Like those are going to be more prevalent, right? And something we'll talk about as well, not just like in turn-based games, we'll also talk about the puzzle game aspect because in puzzle games where there's famously usually no execution at all, those games being able to like gather all the necessary knowledge for you to be able to get through a challenge or get through a puzzle is the difficulty of those kinds of games. And if you're able to like look at a cheat sheet for it, such as like a wiki or a guide or anything that tells you what you need to do, then the difficulty is removed, right? And the difficulty being removed from that is different than the difficulty being removed from an action game that has a similar like knowledge component, right? Because hopefully the action game still has some execution that allows for the difficulty or the, you know, the whatever the action game is trying to do in a way that sets itself apart from other action games. It hopefully it's able to do that in a way that like makes it interesting to play still when you remove like the quote unquote knowledge component of the difficulty, right? So yeah, I think it's worth considering that depending on the genre, the difficulty can be present in a different way. And those are some considerations we can make for this episode as well.
Would Tetris and Puyo Puyo Tetris fall under puzzle genre of game?
Ooh,
Just throwing it out there.
that's tough.
Or is that like an arcade game?
Tetris is like
I
so yeah, go yeah.
yeah, I would say they're puzzles. Like it involves strategy to solve. Like there are certain things, certain patterns that you should do with certain blocks, right? So I would say it's
But there's
puzzle solving.
also a very valid like execution component to Tetris specifically because
True, true.
because moving the blocks is not free.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Like fitting that L block exactly into that, you know, L socket. Yeah, that's.
yeah,
I mean,
especially
I'm not sure how hard that
that is
is,
not
but
free.
Yeah,
especially in
yeah.
classic Tetris. Once you get to like the higher levels, and you have to, and you're trying to send things to the edge in like 1/6 of a second, not free, dude.
Yeah, and
So
Tetris has time pressure, so it has the built-in like real-time component, even though it's a puzzle game,
yes,
right?
Hmm.
yes,
And
I think the time pressure adds more nuance
yeah,
or adds
Yeah.
more components to its difficulty than just like. Oh yeah, also it's random. That's another thing too. It's a random game.
right.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's true.
I
The
forgot to
puzzles.
mention RNG.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because yeah, that's something that we did like try to work out before the episode too. Was like there's some puzzle games where it's like just a set puzzle, and once you beat it, you know what to do, right? And a lot of games are like that, and it's unfortunate because the dev puts in a lot of time to building those puzzles, and then the player gets through it once and they know how to do it forever, like theoretically, right? Famously, box puzzles in the GBA Castlevania games are pretty like they're pretty cool when you first encounter them, and then after that the novelty quickly wears off. You've seen it once, and every time you want to replay the game you got to do it again and again, and it's like kind of
It's just tedious.
it's tedious at that point. Yeah, because it's not, I mean, there's nothing interesting. You just do the solution, right? Like I guess the interesting part would be like how fast you do it if you're talking about like a speedrun context, but that's like an added element from an external factor that's not present in the game originally, because originally in the game there's no time pressure, whereas in a game like Tetris there's time pressure added on with the fact that the puzzles are random. You have to solve the puzzles on the spot, so there's always going to be that like, you know, that feeling of, man, I've got to really master this game and its mechanics in order to overcome the difficulty like this. Yeah, great point. Great point. Thank you for bringing up the Tetris point. Okay, do we have like enough things to work with on the definition of difficulty?
We can talk about the categories of difficulty that I've drafted up.
Yeah,
and
sure.
what you guys think about it. So I'm pulling up this whiteboard. I've drafted that I could split difficulty into like 4 main parts. That being, and they all kind of like work together, but like the first 2 are like the baseline, right? And we'll start with execution, right? There's execution. I'm gonna write it down. Execution and knowledge, right?
Knowledge. Shout out to Ty
Knowledge, just a
Lopez. That man's in jail right
baseline
now.
knowledge, right? That's the flat knowledge that you need to know. And I was wondering which one would go first on like this ladder if they were like linearly sequenced. And I was like, oh, I put execution first, right? But then I've recently been playing Castlevania games, in relation to Karushi recommending me and gifting me this Castlevania Advanced Collection, right? And those older games, they usually come with a manual, right? And there's a manual in that game too. I just chose not to read it, right? So when I came into these Castlevania games, I didn't have the knowledge. There was like some knowledge that I didn't have, so I didn't even know I could execute the thing that I'm trying to do, right? So thinking back on it, I was like, okay, wait, maybe knowledge is like the first level, and then execution is the second level, right? Because you need to know what to execute. If you kind of get what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's
Right?
Yeah,
true.
I mean it's like there's subclasses to that can that can that can layer on top of each other, right? So I guess to your point, Retro Rage, you might say like, okay, knowledge of what you can do it comes first. The knowledge of how to execute it comes second. Then knowledge of what the opponent does or what like the strategy to like beat or what the enemies do, it comes third, and then fourth is executing how to counter that. Comes after, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the whole chicken and egg theory, right? Like which came first. Yeah, I mean in this case, I feel like knowledge is probably the thing that comes first, because at the end of the day, right, when you first play a game, single player or multiplayer, you're probably learning how to play the game first, right? Like you're doing a tutorial.
Yeah, I mean, how could you? I'm sorry.
You're
How
good,
could
you're
you
good.
have execution without knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Would you call pressing right, holding right execution, right? I don't think so.
Yeah, there's probably always knowledge rooted in every element of gameplay that takes place, right? Like
Yeah.
you got, at the end of the day, okay, do you always have to know how to play a game? That's like a philosophical question. Do you always have to know how to play, right? Like a lot of people skip tutorials these days. Like they just want to play the game. Like I remember in when I was younger, like when we, first got into like Pokemon, right? Like everyone has their Pokemon cards and stuff, and we just like played them, right? No rules. Like we just kind of made up stuff when we were playing. I mean, if you're making up your own rules, like that is kind of like you're making up your own knowledge, and then you're executing strategies based on that theoretically, right? But then once you like actually
Yeah.
learn how to play, it's like, oh man, now I gotta actually like know what I'm doing. But the knowledge still comes first. Even I feel like even if you don't know what you're doing, there is some kind of like innate knowledge that you're working off of, like instincts, right? And yeah, that's like a philosophical thing. Yeah, okay, excellent. Was there anything else that you had as a
Oh
basis
yeah,
there?
and then that's right. And knowledge in this case was I put there's two main components to knowledge. It's that it's your ability to learn and how much you need to know, right? Ability to learn,
Yeah,
how much you need to know, or like application of said knowledge, right?
yeah,
So it's not just like hard knowledge check, it's also the player's ability to learn within the game,
hmm,
right? So if we're measuring difficulty, right? Because we're talking about difficulty,
yep,
we're going to talk about like how much do you need to know as well as how to get there, right? How to get there.
yeah,
So those are like my baseline. First two things in my 4 category difficulty definition. And
hmm,
then the two things after that are mental stack, right? So how many things do you have to keep present in like any point of the game at like one time, right? Like parallel processes, right?
yeah,
So how many things do you have to keep track of all at once, multitasking, right? And then once you have all of that, then you can talk about theory, right? How do you plan for the future given your present circumstances in the game? So like if I had to like put difficulty into like 4 categories, I would have these 4 main categories for me at least. That's what I came up with.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that's a great like outline here, and we can see it. What's being typed up in this box as well. Yeah, I think part of why a lot of people have a hard time seeing that difficulty is subjective. It's like, oh man, so many things in this game required a lot of effort from me. There's no way other people. There's no way it required less effort for other people, right? It's like there's a name for that, by the way. Like it's like you're like the superior one. I wish I remembered right now, but
There's no way I'm having a skill issue right now, right?
yeah. Like it's basically like people have a tendency to like overrate themselves. Basically, I wish I remembered the like psychological term
Dunning
for that.
Kruger.
Yes, that is it. Yes,
At least when you're
Dunning-Kruger.
bottom fragging, it's Dunning Kruger, where you're
No,
just
right,
like,
right.
oh, I'm gas.
Yeah. Like there's no way I'm this bad, right? Like it's that kind of thing. Which I think that's what leads people. I mean, okay, maybe we can touch on that a bit more later, but I think that's what builds the idea into people that like difficulty is like objective, right? It's just like a standard, right? Which to be fair, we're all working off of like some standard when we build an idea of difficulty in our minds. But at the end of the day, like it's gonna be different per person no matter what. So that's why it's better to like outline like the building blocks rather than like try to reach the result. Like what I mean by that is like what components add to like this perception, or like what components contribute to like how we engage in something that's difficult, rather than like saying whether something is difficult or not. Because saying whether something is difficult or not is like not as interesting personally, in my opinion. I feel like when we're talking about a game, like it's a lot more interesting to say like, oh, this game has tight parry timing, or this game has lots of punishment, or this game has you know an,
This game is like experience of playing this game is difficult because trying to it doesn't give you a lot of the knowledge you need in order to actually like pass encounters.
yeah, and acquiring that knowledge is like non-trivial kind of thing. Yeah, Yeah,
And acquiring that knowledge requires you to play other games and actually get it from them. Like, come
yeah.
on. I'm talking about a very specific
Oh
game here.
dear.
Wait,
Oh,
I just
dear.
realized that the Reddit users on the r/Souls-like, every
Uh-huh.
time they make a comment saying that I've played all these Souls-like games, they're trying to establish a baseline, which is
Yeah.
actually good communicative skills, right? Establishing the baseline where they say that, oh yeah, I've played all these games, therefore, whatever they say, right? That's
Yeah.
like
And the
that.
hours too.
Yeah,
Accolades.
I've played
Yo, yo.
I've played
No
10
hit.
I played 10,000 hours, Soul Level 1, Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring, you know.
That's something Ross did actually. I beat an Elden Ring,
That's an appeal to
Soul
like
level 1, and it's
Reddit appeal to like
funny.
ethos, you know?
Yeah, oh yeah.
But it makes sense though when talking about difficulty, it being subjective, right? Like,
Yeah.
for example, if I were to recommend a platforming game to like Karushi or like fraufraw, right? And I played a lot of platformers, and then I played this game and I have like a lot of struggle with it. Despite playing so many platformers, I might go up to Karushi and say, "Hey, I think this game's like really hard. Like, actually, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I think this game is hard." And that's coming from the baseline that I've played a lot of platformers, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, that's like that. What is Dunman? What's
Dunning-Kruger.
that guy's name?
Wait,
Like, oh, I'm the gas or whatever.
Oh yeah, Dunning-Kruger. Yeah, yeah.
Because everyone's base, like their standard is almost like themselves, right? That's the standard that you always have with you,
Yeah.
right? It's like yourself.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, like, basically, I'm just trying to say, like, it's definitely useful to see, to, like, understand someone's background for why they would say something. But that's why it's always more useful to me for someone to say, like, what made them feel like it was difficult, right? Was it the backtrack? Because then that, like, exposes stuff, if anything. And then I can, based on what they said from that, I can inform my own, like, opinion on how I would feel about it. Like, if someone is saying, oh, Silksong is hard because you're taking double damage, because your run backs are long, because, things like that, right? Or, like, has corpse running, then I'm like, yeah, okay, I understand. And then I can just, like, make my own judgment based on that, right? Whereas if they just say it's difficult, they're, like, obscuring the information from me. Like, I have some very unreliable information to go off of because they're making that judgment based on, like, a subjective viewpoint, and I can't really work from that. I can work from things that are just factual about the game, like the game has corpse runs, but I can't really work from this game is difficult if I'm thinking about, like, how to recommend a game to someone, or if I'm trying to play a game that someone recommends to me.
Do you imagine when recommending game, that's the first thing you say? Oh, this game is difficult. Like, it's not even. It doesn't even have it's not even a positive connotation to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
In fact, you know what? I want to say that Silksong was actually difficult for me. It was difficult for me to get through. All right. It was putting me to sleep. Remember how I was telling you? Yeah.
Yeah. That is a funny point, actually, because I had that experience, but with Hollow Knight. I actually found Silksong to be much less grating to get through than Hollow Knight, but that's not because of, like, some idea of difficulty. That's because of how, like, much I enjoyed the games, right? Silksong, I was like, oh, I'm actually enjoying this game in the beginning. Let me be clear, in the beginning of the game, I was enjoying it because the movement is a lot better than Hollow Knight's beginning of the game. But then over the course of the game, I started to see more of the trolling, more of the very questionable design elements that just contribute to frustrations. Yeah, dude, no benches. Like, all of this is, like, just contributes to frustrating design, and I'm like, wow, this game is interesting to say the least. Interesting, derogatory. It went from interesting, it went from positive, interesting, complimentary. It went from complimentary, interesting to derogatory, interesting.
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah. Anyway, sorry, tangent. Yeah. So, okay. Do we have a good?
No, that adds another category that I didn't think of. Player interest, right?
Mhm.
I didn't even think of that. Like, I was thinking about, like, execution, knowledge, mental stack theory, dude. But there's also player interest. Like, how interesting.
Yeah, you know what game was hard for me? Baldur's Gate 3. Sorry.
You're good.
You know exactly how I feel.
Mhm.
Nah, that game, not interesting, tedious, knowledge checky, and then they give you no knowledge. That game didn't even explain how, like, for a new player especially, how an attack roll worked, which was so bad. It was like, oh, like, because they never were like, oh, your armor class is being compared to what you roll, and then, like, you add the bonuses on top of that, and then that's how you get your like attack roll, right? And then, like, here's the stat. I would have appreciated that, honestly. I would have appreciated getting that tutorial. They never tell you, and then half the time you're walking around the world, and then they're like, "Oop, here's an encounter," and then you're like, because you got jumped, your initiative roll is low, and they don't even tell you how the initiative is calculated, and then or like, and then they're like, "Oh, you gotta reset now." And then when you do dialogue checks, they're like, "Oh, you wanted to do the charisma check? Oh, it's actually difficulty class 15. You're rolling a d20. Good luck." And then you check like the other skill check, and it's like, "Oh, it was difficulty class 5." I'm like, "Come on, really?" Yeah,
Yeah.
that game was hard, but in ways that I thought were very, very, very like
Okay, so is it difficult or punishing, right? Right, guys?
Mhm,
Right,
both.
guys?
mhm.
Boom, boom, boom. I got twin guns out
Bingo.
here, dude.
Bingo.
Yeah, it was both. It was both. It was.
I mean,
I
it's
think.
yeah.
I think my save file on Baldur's Gate 3 was like 10 hours, and then my actual playtime was like 20 hours because the rest of it I had to keep resetting.
Oh, you're trying to get all those rolls to pass the dialogues or something?
No, it's just like or some random stuff happens that I didn't anticipate, and then the situation gets out of control and I die, or it's completely unwinnable. I'm
Okay.
like,
So,
oh, I'm just
I
gonna
see. I see.
reset because I don't want to spend 5 minutes losing the combat encounter just to have to reset anyway.
Wait, did
And
you
it's
play on the hardest difficulty or something?
no, I was playing on normal, bro. I will
I'm
admit, like, I
surprised.
was having somewhat of a skill issue because this was my first like CRPG first experience with like
Uh,
D&D. But after, my opinion of that game's like refined because I started playing other games. I've started playing like I have a playthrough of Rogue Trader going on that I probably should continue to play through because that game's really fun. Um,
yeah.
I've played I've played a little bit of Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. I probably should play that game after I finish Rogue Trader. And those games are hard, but one, they aren't as punishing in terms of like gotchas, like knowledge gotchas, where it's like, oh, you didn't know about this? Here you go, you die, and then it's like, how was I supposed to know? And then they are also do a lot better of a job explaining things to you, right? They're a lot like in Pathfinder, they will explain like and walk through an example of here's how an attack roll works, which people might find that tedious, but for me, it's like, well, I don't know how I would get explain like know this any other way. I appreciate it, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, to piggyback off that, so would you say that imagine like you have save states in Baldur's Gate 3 or these games that you're playing, right? They're
Yeah.
basically save states where you can reload at any time.
Yeah.
So would you still think that the game is hard, like or difficult? Or is it like because you can save state, right? Like, oh, you failed the check, you just go back to your save
I
state.
think in the most basic definition of difficulty, it's still difficult, but I don't know if I would call it difficult because like it takes a lot of effort for me to play the game, right?
Yeah.
But
I guess the overall experience for you was
it's
difficult.
difficult.
Like how
It's
Silksong
more
was for
work.
me,
It's more
right?
intense for
Yeah.
me. But in
You don't
terms
like
of
the reloading part, right? So yeah,
yeah,
that's understandable.
but in terms of like the experience, I wouldn't call it necessarily difficult. I'd call it frustrating and tedious.
Oh,
Yeah.
bingo.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Bingo. Yeah. The safe state, dude. That's a home run point
Yeah,
right there.
Larian does this thing where they like think that save scumming is something to lean into rather than like something that people do to avoid bad outcomes. So like an exploit people will like use to avoid bad outcomes. So they're like, "Oh, people save scum? Okay, well, let's just like have that be a feature and not a bug," but not realizing that save scumming is super tedious. It is not fun. Don't design your game around people save scumming. Don't You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
when I played BG3, like I played with a group initially. We pretty much we don't save scum the dialogue options. We pretty much stick with whatever outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the dice roll is yeah. So I wouldn't say the experience was bad for me, but it definitely went sour when one of the one of the friend in our group started playing on his own, and that's like a whole nother story.
Oh dear.
Oh yeah. I played the game solo, so I was like, I'm gonna do what I
Yeah,
want.
You met.
definitely.
For
Yeah,
most most of the
I would
dialogue, I didn't.
honestly, yeah, I will honestly say that game is better enjoyed if you play solo first. Personally,
Yeah.
personally.
You know.
Well, I didn't enjoy it solo, so
Mhm.
You know the dice system. I mean, I guess Baldur's Gate 3. They just assume everyone's played D&D before or whatever. Because yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's not something they originally came up with. Like
No.
the D&D
that comes from
developers.
D&D, that comes from 5e, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
fifth
right.
edition. Yeah.
5th edition specifically. You know, yeah, okay, yeah. I'll make that point later on. But the save state thing is so interesting because a lot of people think that if you have a game where like save states are possible, then it makes the game makes it easy, right? I actually think it depends on the game, and I don't necessarily think save states make every game easy. Because there are some games where you still have to like apply yourself, right? The save states don't take away like the application part. Like you still have to be able to do it, right? And maybe you're able to like get the best RNG using save states, or maybe you're able to eliminate the punishment. And punishment again, that's like why it's a whole separate thing. But eliminating the punishment in some games doesn't like shortcut your way out of having to actually do or complete the challenge, right? Like for example, one of my favorite games, right, Umihara Kawase. That game, when you lose all your lives, you have to start from the very first level over again, right? But if you have a save state where you just lose all your lives and you just start within the level, you still have to be able to do the level. And in fact, sometimes by having a save state that does that, you're you're kind of cheating yourself out of being able to develop the consistency on the techniques that are necessary to get through the previous levels. So, there's definitely an element of, you know, that a lot of people say like, oh, having the run back makes sure the player didn't get lucky, right? But I think that has more so to do with the level design rather than the run back. Like, and that's something we talked about in the previous episode a little bit. So it's a little bit of a tie-in. But that's some of the arguments I see people use to defend runbacks and like how those contribute to difficulty. I personally don't think runbacks contribute to difficulty at all. I think they contribute to frustration that seeps into the perception of difficulty because of, what we've established here is like the player held interest, right? In the game. The less interested you are, the less likely you are to engage yourself in the game, and also the less likely you are to apply the things that you need to apply to overcome the difficulties of said game. And when you're talking about something that sets you so far back in the progress that you've made in the game up to that point, then that's going to contribute to the frustrating element, right? But if you have save states, you remove the frustrating element, and that can allow you to focus more on the actual like execution component or the actual knowledge component that the game might be focused on, which in this case Umihara Kawase focuses on, right? And the reason I say it focuses on this, despite the fact that you're set all the way back to the beginning when you lose all your lives, is that the game is a practice mode, which eliminates any sort of punishment associated with doing the normal game. So if you really wanted to, you could just go to the practice mode and lab out the level and be able to come consistent at it and make the run back a non-factor, which is why I think it's so interesting when you have other games where the challenge is not polarized towards the encounter or like the gameplay or the boss fight, but rather like the setback, like the punishment, And that's something I've been terming as frustrating design, which obviously frustrating is just inherently a feeling thing. It's a subjective word, but it's just to convey the idea that some games center themselves around the feelings and the punishment rather than like the execution or the knowledge itself. And you can see this in some old school games, like games from the NES era, where it's literally frustrating design incarnate, right? For a lot of those games. But those games, a lot of people would still agree are pretty hard, especially compared to the stuff nowadays, where The stuff nowadays, they're built to be completed. Let's be real. The games nowadays, they're made to be completed. The games in the NES era, they're made and they don't expect the player to necessarily complete it. And if you're able to
Yeah.
You ever
complete
played
it, yeah,
Battletoads and your Ghosts and Goblins.
yeah,
Heck
exactly.
yeah.
Speaking of games that were definitely not made to be completed, you guys ever played what was it? Simpsons Beat 'em Up? That's the game that I always think about.
Oh yeah, The Sims. Oh my goodness, yes.
Oh my
yes.
goodness, you were not meant to beat that game.
The
Even
quarter
if you
eaters.
remove the punishment, like I played that game with infinite lives. Even if you remove the punishment of like, oh, you lose and you lose all your lives, and you gotta like go back to the beginning or whatever, that
Mhm.
game was still hard.
Well, there you go. Bingo, yeah.
Yeah, a perfect example of what Karushi's talking about, because that game is like so many enemies.
Yeah,
How are you gonna live through this?
they were definitely designed to eat your quarters.
Oh yeah, that game was
Yeah.
designed to make money.
Quarter munching
The
gameplay.
original greedy microtransactions, bro.
Oh yeah, I mean arcade game design, quarter munching gameplay. I mean, hey, back then as well,
Gameplay,
like
dude.
yeah, back then in the NES era, like the whole idea was like if you could pad out your game enough to give like a box playtime, like hey, this game gives you like, 12 hours of fun, right? And there's like only 1 hour of content, but like the 12 hours comes from like grinding out the levels, right? And that's why a lot of people don't end up beating those games, or if they do beat them, they beat them with like save states or whatever, right? I'm not saying the save states are any less legitimate. By the way, I'm not one of those people. I think you can do whatever you want. For a single player game, literally, who cares? Just do whatever you want, right? Don't let anyone stop you from enjoying the game how you want to enjoy it. For a multiplayer game where there are ranked systems and anti-cheating systems, where you're playing against other people, where you're playing with other people, you should be honest with yourself. And if if you're gonna use those things, then make sure you're not playing with other people who are not going to use them, or make sure those other people are fine with you using them. And most games obviously have a blanket, you cannot use these things, so that it's a fair playing ground for everyone, right? But for a single player game, that thing doesn't really matter. You just play however you want. So if someone beats something with save states, they can be honest with themselves still, but they can say they beat it if they want to. That's up to them, right? But a lot of these NES era games are literally not necessarily made to be beaten. And when I don't say, I want to distinguish it from meant to be beaten versus made to be beaten. They can still be meant to be beaten, right? But it's just like the idea that games nowadays, like just to contrast it, games nowadays, you're like supposed to be able to beat it. Like that's part of the QA testing, right? Otherwise, people would leave an angry review and it wouldn't lead to good sales, unfortunately. And a lot of people, that's why a lot of things people say these days about difficult games are like, oh, that's risky. That's not going to do well with the media. That's not going to do well in the reviews, because there's like difficulty elements, right? Which inherently limits the reach of the game potentially.
But the press should not be commenting about difficulties, especially after that Cuphead scandal.
That's a whole separate thing. Anyway, all right, yeah.
We're not gonna go on that.
All right, I went on my rant there. But yeah, I think it's great to add on these auxiliary things to our definition of difficulty, like the interest factor, the frustrating factor, which I think we can agree that punishment is related to difficulty, but isn't intrinsically difficulty itself, right? Because after all, and I know one of you made this comment on the last podcast episode. I'm not going to repeat the entire comment, but the gist of it was that, spanking a child works, right? Something like that is what you said in the comment. If you want to double down on that in the comment section of this episode, feel free. I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say, especially in the context of this episode. But regardless, we can all agree that that's detached and separate from difficulty itself, even if related. All right. Very good. I think we have a good definition to work from for the rest of this episode. 54 minutes in. Excellent. This is what I love to see. Love some juicy discussion. All right. So how do we want to further tackle this and apply it to like video games we've played before, right? Like there's definitely some games we already kind of approached this a little bit. There's some games that focus on certain aspects of difficulty more than others. Are these any more or less interesting in you guys' views? Or yeah.
More or less interesting.
But I'm just like something to get us started, like
for like Dark Souls, right?
mhm.
A game I played recently last year. Not a Dark Souls player, by the way. Dark Souls 3. I was playing Dark Souls 3, and that game is not hard. Not a hard
I
game.
agree.
Right? There were some actually. It overall the game is not hard, but there were some difficult bosses.
Mhm.
Right? There were some difficult bosses. I'd say like two of the bosses were difficult, but like the rest were like not trivial. Right?
Mhm.
So overall the game isn't that hard, but I still ended up spending what 54 hours, 45 hours of my life playing through that game because I kept dying over and over and I
Mhm.
had to backtrack over and over. There's this section specifically these two dogs and two wizards on like the staircase that I spent like 8 hours on. Legit 8 hours on like 0.5% of the game. Hey, can you believe that 0.5% of the game represented 20% of my game time?
Yeah.
So like it's something like that where I'm like, okay, dude, I hate this game. Like I actually hate this game. Where like I'm spending so much time on such a small portion of the content, right? Which is where I get like, okay, if your game has a backtrack, like if I'm spending a lot of time doing the same thing over and over again, it's like my game time in relation to the game content is like skewed, right? So in that case, people are like, "Oh, Dark Souls, a difficult game," right? In my opinion, I never said that game was difficult in those sections. I was like, "This is very frustrating, right? This is
Mhm.
very frustrating that I have to come back and like keep doing this and doing this over again." And people are like, "Okay, but if you're failing so much, it must be difficult, right?" Well, that's where the interest comes in. I'm not really interfacing with the game anymore. I'm kind of just throwing my body at the wall,
Yeah.
trying to get through the section, right? Like, I'll be genuinely honest, no thoughts are going through my head. I'm not like, oh yeah, I'm not reflecting on that run back, you know? I'm not
Mhm.
like, oh, how should I approach this situation differently? No, I'm just like, please get me out of this situation to let me move on to the game, right?
To get to the interesting
So,
parts, yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I'm like, Dark Souls people are like, oh, difficult game, but like genuinely, I genuinely, you know what? I genuinely think that like when you get stuck, it like cements itself into your brain, right? Like I guess human nature, we like are drawn towards like really positive, really negative patterns, right? So Dark Souls, if you like you keep throwing yourself at the wall, it leaves an impression on the player, right? It leaves an impression and like I feel like Souls like has definitely left an impression on like our player base of the modern day, right? Just like
Mhm.
how there are these like old Ghost and Goblins may have left an impression on like the previous generation of gamers, right? 'Cause just due to the raw like emotional damage that is occurring in these situations, right?
There's
I don't know.
definitely more gaming masochism than there used to be, which is ironic because a lot of the games nowadays are a lot less like there's a lot less friction being applied to you as you're playing the game, right? But I think what's really going on with like Dark Souls popularity is like again, it's the illusion or perception of difficulty conveyed through roadblocks, like something that you're not able to succeed at right away, but through a gruesome or not gruesome, grueling trial and error process, you're able to overcome in the sense of accomplishment that comes from that. It's like, wow, I overcame this difficult thing. But it's not the thing that was difficult. It was the process of overcoming it that maybe you saw as difficult. And perhaps the reason it was difficult for you in the first place is because of, yeah, as Retro was just saying, you're trying to brute force through it. You're like, man, I shouldn't have to put effort into this. It's so easy, right? Because I mean, Dark Souls games are inherently are easy, and beyond the fact that the tasks you might trying to overcome at any given point is easy or hard, a lot of the game gives you outs to like those situations that you just have to be willing to use, right? And
Correct.
sure, those outs come with like some kind of margin of error. Like, let's say you use like your like there's all these like consumables, right, that the game gives you, and you use it, let's say you mess up. That doesn't come back to you ever again. You have to buy it back, right? But the game gives you the out of being able to grind enemies for money as much as you want, like money being souls. You can literally grind souls all you want the whole game and become as powerful as you need to be to get through it with no problem. And to me, those outs that exist in the game show that it's not meant to be a difficult game from my interpretation of how the developers present the game. But if anything, the reputation that Dark Souls games have for being difficult comes from the community and not even from the developers. And the developers just kind of leaned into it. But as time went on, these games matured more. The developers found what they found like what worked best for their games and doubled down on that. And that's what we started to see in games like Bloodborne and games like Elden Ring and all these other games that came after, right? Because let's be real, all these Souls fans never played Kingsfield. I haven't played Kingsfield. I've only read about Kingsfield. But Kingsfield has like the actual like skeleton and framework for what people would consider to be the reputation of difficulty that Souls games have nowadays. But no one's played that game and no one's going to go back to play that, which is completely fair. I think what people really should be wanting, rather than like just, oh, difficulty, should be polish, and polish that complements something that feels good to overcome. Because if it feels good to do it, you'll be interested, you'll be invested. And if you're interested and invested, no matter how much effort it takes, you will be willing to overcome it, right? Because you like it. Like if you're interested, you probably like the game. So I think that's what developers should focus on, and that's like a lesson to take from like Dark Souls itself. But no. Instead, I'm gonna go on Reddit and say difficult and give me upvotes. You know, like that. Yeah, that's how people spend their time instead. And to that point, like there's Retro Major to point about like the game wasn't difficult, but there are some bosses that were. I think that's actually a great precision point to hone in on, like specific sections in Dark Souls that were genuine like great moments within it, like overcoming like a boss like Pontiff Sullivan, or overcoming a boss like Dancer of the Boreal Valley. Those are great moments of the game. Those are highlights of the game. I personally don't consider moments like what's that boss called? Deacons of the Deep or Crystal Sage. I don't consider those moments to be interesting parts of the game. And Dark Souls 3 is a game that a lot of people would consider to have great bosses. And when a game that people consider to have great bosses has bosses like those two, it's not a good look. And we look back in like earlier Dark Souls games, and people call those games hard as well. But the bosses in those games are like the most basic baby puzzle bosses I've seen in my life, dude. It's like the minute you figure out the gimmick, it's literally trivial. And a lot of people will tell you like, oh, play Dark Souls, but don't do this. Or like play Dark Souls, but like don't look up a guide. Or like play Dark Souls, but if you didn't beat it at like level 1, you didn't actually beat the game. Like, yeah, we can make all these arbitrary restrictions to make it hard. But you can put arbitrary restrictions in any game to make it hard. I could put arbitrary restrictions in Kirby saying, oh yeah, in Kirby, you're not allowed to use copy abilities. Okay, now we got something interesting there, don't we? I could play Mario and say, oh, you're not allowed to jump. I'm not even sure if that's possible, but it probably is. Yeah, you can make any game hard by putting arbitrary restrictions. I feel like that's something that should be something that's up to the player, right? If they're interested in doing that, that's up to the player. Speedruns are inherently arbitrary restrictions. You place time pressure environments on a game that didn't originally have time pressure environments, but they're so fun to watch because it changes the way the game is played on such a fundamental level that allows for mechanics that are in the game to be explored in a new light, right? And that's why speedrunning is so cool. That's why all these things have their own interesting aspects to them. Like when you place like arbitrary restrictions, depending on the rule set of the arbitrary restrictions, of course. But that's like entirely separate from the intended experience that the developers gave to the player, like the vanilla game, as we like to say. That's why it's not really worth focusing on whether a game is difficult or not for people that are on Reddit and make these posts. It's better to focus on specific mechanics in the game that caught your interest. Like, I'm going to bring up this Reddit thread quickly because it's on my mind right now. But there was a thread a few days ago. 9 souls harder than Silksong, 197 upvotes. Okay. So a lot of people engage with this thread. Okay. Then we scroll down further. Well, I just finished 9 Souls and I thought it was a very good game. Unique mechanics and quite entertaining. Yeah. Like this is great. And then for whatever reason they decided to compare it to Silksong. For me, it is not more difficult than Silksong. And then blah blah blah. Like literally, the minute they said that, like the rest of it doesn't matter because it's just subjective, right? Which sure, subjective things are interesting to discuss, but at the end of the day, why does it matter what's more difficult or not? Other people can say that this game is more difficult than the other game based on my experience, and then we just end up going nowhere because no one's actually bringing anything meaningful to discussion. But the meaningful things to the discussion are like what contributed to the feeling of the difficulty, which is the mechanics part, which is what is better to focus on in the first place. And at the end of the day, if you're focusing on the mechanics rather than like the core question of like whether it's difficult or not, you might as well just frame the post in that manner. But framing the post in saying are Nine Souls mechanics different than Silksong is not going to get people to engage with it. So that's the reality, right? Someone says apples and oranges, they're pretty similar, but they focus on different skills. Yes, right? Like these are two separate games. Why are we comparing? And Nine Souls is not even like Nine Souls is barely a Metroidvania, if at all, in the first place. But for whatever reason, they get compared, I guess, because they're both highly successful 2D side scroller games that have an art style that like has drawn a lot of people to play them. Something like that. I don't know. I cannot really think of anything similar between Silksong and Nine Souls, but whatever. Point being, I feel like these threads disappoint me because it feels like it's people's opportunity to just like pump themselves up like, oh, I played a hard game. You guys didn't play the hard game. This game is harder than whatever you guys played, you know? Like it's just Reddit. Anyway, this is definitely my ranting moment, but like just Reddit system with upvotes and all this like prompts people to make these posts and it's just awful. It's not really genuine discussion. And
Learning the social media ways of engagement. Right?
yeah. Oh, another thread, and I'll make my point, or I'll close out my point here with this thread. Rank the difficulty: Hollow Knight, Silksong, Celeste, Nine Souls, Cuphead. In a Metroidvania subreddit, by the way. I hear very different things about all of these. Oh, I wonder why you hear very different things about all of these. They're all different games.
They're not even the same genre. Oh my
Dude,
god.
Exactly.
These people. Oh my goodness. This episode, you thought that this was gonna be a discussion about like difficulty and all that. No, this is just a discussion to say that people are dog ass stupid.
If we consider doing all the things possible in Celeste, it is miles ahead of everything else on the list. Anyway, like that's not a point in reading this thread. I just found it like amusing that people focus their discussion on this rather than focusing on like mechanics of the games, which are more interesting to talk about in my opinion, and are also more useful to inform someone about whether they should play a game or not. Right? Because at the end of the day, we're talking about these games because, you know, let's say they had a dramatic impact on us, and a lot of people, when they like something, they want to share it. They want to share the fact that they liked it, right? That's just like natural to do. And in this case, like this person probably liked both Nine Souls and Silksong, but talking about which one is harder, maybe I guess you can do it just to like spark discussion, but at the end of the day, you're not really getting anywhere. People are just gonna say this is hard for me. Another person's gonna say that one is not hard for me, and then you don't get anywhere, right? But if you can start from like just factual things that are in the game and use those to inform like, oh, this is how you can get better at this, or like, you know, share strategy from that, I feel like that's where we can actually like advance like and make progress in terms of like the discussion. But people probably see it differently, and it's evident by the number of upvotes and number of comments on a thread like that, you know. I made my own thread, which we'll get to a little bit later on, but the whole point I wanted to make here is that a lot of the way difficulty is framed is going to be based on like how the game presents its mechanics, right? And then how the player engages with the mechanics is a whole separate thing, which is like the level of interest the player develops over the course of the game, depending on how much that game taps into that. And I'm hoping that, you know, we can, you know, following this episode, or like whoever's listening or watching, I hope that you can like look at things from a different perspective when you view like difficult games that are either tagged on Steam or how people, you know, talk about them, and look at it in a way that allows for you to actually like reflect more deeply about the game rather than like a very surface level difficult or not or frustrating or not, you know, that isn't really going to be useful for another person you're talking to unless they know exactly like how you feel about certain games. Like, and for that to even be the case, you have to have a level of intimacy like outside of the thing you're discussing in the first place, which is not going to be the case on the internet. Okay, I went on my rant. Yeah.
All right, I got you.
Yes.
So, that you bring up, since the Reddit post brought up Celeste, I actually think Celeste is not a difficult game, and it's not punishing. There's no punishment in Celeste, and it's not difficult. And the reason why I think it's not difficult is because the game, like, remember how we brought up earlier that the games nowadays are made to be intended to be beat?
Yep.
Right? Celeste is like a perfect example of like a teacher game, right? Where it's designed in a way where you are supposed to be able to do everything by the time you reach the end of the game. Like the game design, it teaches you slowly and slowly with quotes, right? But like I say slowly because it's not my first rodeo with like this style of game, so I just like speed ran through it. But the game is designed in a way where that like your average person can like pick up the game and learn everything and practice everything, right? So like the end result is that you like do all the puzzle platforming and you like get to the end and it feels like an achievement, right? But overall, a lot of people are able to beat that game, right? And it's not to say that just because a lot of people beat it means it's not difficult, but the way it gives you information and the leniency at which it is to execute that knowledge makes it so that the game is not difficult. There's a lot of time and leniency, especially at like early game, that the game gives you to like be able to do the puzzle or the platforming, and then by the end of the game where you're like more mastered with those mechanics, they make the leniency a little smaller, but it's still like you're already expected to be able to do it at that smaller leniency because you've been practicing those same skills throughout the entirety of the game, right? So those are my thoughts on Celeste being like as a game, right? It's not difficult and it's not punishing, right?
Did you enjoy
That's
that?
what allows you to have that practice and that interest, right? Like because it's not punishing, I don't feel bad about going back to the game and like trying out different things or learning the timings because there's no punishment. It instantly loads back. I get to try again. There's no run back where I have to think about doing some nonsense platforming with nonsense enemies because there isn't enemies in that game really, right? It's just pure platforming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm so focused. The game is so focused on what it's doing that there's no distractions, right? There's like absolutely zero distractions. You just do it, and then there's like optional platforming, like strawberries you can collect that like add to your skills, right? By doing these optional things. So like everything in that game is built so that you can learn how to play the game, which makes it an amazing game. It is the very amazing game that you guys should play. That is much better than Ballo Bite and Milk Mom.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay. So we can start building the matrices while we're here. So yeah, this is just part of our episode. We wanted to build a couple of like difficulty punishment matrices. We also wanted to build like a one for execution. We wanted to build one for knowledge, etc. Right. So according to Retro Rage, Celeste is going to go in the lower left corner of this matrix because he's saying it's neither difficult nor punishing, right? So it would be in the bottom left. Yeah, I think as well I can like bounce off of this. I mean, I haven't played Celeste, but there's a game I played when I was younger called Fancy Pants Adventure. And I think back
Is that a
then,
Flash game?
Fancy Pants Adventure. Oh my
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
goodness.
that was such a cool game back then. And I didn't even know. Oh, okay, yeah, I didn't even know it was on Steam. They released like a collection or something on Steam. But anyway, um, when I was younger, a lot of people consider that game difficult, right? But I think part of it is, um, like we just don't have like as much like gamer skills, quote unquote, when we're younger, right? So the way we perceive things is a lot different than how we perceive it when we get older, right? And the last time I played that game, I think was like high school or something, just to like reminisce. And I'm like, wow, this is not really like what I thought it was when I was younger. And I think that's the same thing, but with Celeste as well. And actually, if a game becomes easier as like you're better at the game, or like as you grow older and you have like just more gamer skills in general, I think that's actually like a positive sign for a said game. Because that goes to show that the game focuses on developable skills rather than just like outright like frustration, you know? And if those developable skills are centered around core aspects of the game, like, you know, Celeste, you're supposed to get better at the platforming, right? Then even more so, it feels better. But something I've noticed with a lot of Metroidvanias nowadays, especially, is that they don't focus like their framing of difficulty around things that are like core to their game. So as an example, you have all these games like corpse runs and runbacks, and those distract from core aspects of the game because those games end up focusing like on they're supposed to focus on like the combat or like the exploration, right? But because they add those like extra factors that contribute to punishment, they distract from the things they're supposed to focus on, and then they give people like a perception that, oh, there's more things I gotta focus on, therefore it's difficult, right? And it's distracting from the thing that the game is like trying to do like extremely well. So as an example of this, Hollow Knight does really well with like supposed world building, right? Supposed world building and supposed exploration. But because it has other things that clash with that, such as the corpse running and the general like, you know, knowledge checks at places. And when I say knowledge checks, I mean hard knowledge checks, as in spikes are down there, you cannot see them, you drop down, you get hit by them, you die, right? And the minute you get hit by it, you know it's there, you're not going to forget ever again. Or if you do forget, you know, you'll remember the next time, right? Like those things inherently distract from what the game's supposed to do in the terms of the exploration, because they're like distinct and separate from it, right? And same thing with corpse running. It like clashes with the what the player is supposed to focus on. And even worse is that the player that's better at the game is like not even affected by the corpse running whatsoever. But the player that's like really bad is gonna feel the effects of that corpse running like tenfold. And that is also like not a positive sign in my opinion. Right? So I definitely think some degree of difficulty is just like focus for your game. Like a game like Metroid, people generally don't call Metroid games hard, but I don't think a lot of people have played NES Metroid, the first Metroid game, either. That game is so brutal for like absolutely no reason. Like it has no right to be that brutal. Like stuff like, oh, when you die, you respawn at the beginning of the area and you have none of the progress that you had when you went through the area. Or stuff like you gotta farm back your ammo from enemies, and those enemies are like just like they're just like spammed basically. Or stuff like you don't have the map, right? And not having the map makes exploration harder, which to be fair, exploration is the core part of the game. But there's so many things that just inherently like build up like so much friction in spots that are probably misplaced, probably. And when you come back to it, you're not really any better at it, kind of thing. Because there's just so many clashing elements, so many factors that kind of distract from one of the central things that you need to focus on in order to get better at the game, that, you know, if you come back to it after a while, you're just gonna get bodied as well, unless you literally like grind it out as like a speed run. And that's a whole separate thing, because when you're speedrunning, you're trying to like grind out every aspect of the game to minimize the number of factors that would prevent you from being able to complete the game in a smooth fashion. Yeah, so I mentioned all of that to say, getting back to what I was originally going to say, Umihara Kawase, right? I think actually different games in the series are different degrees of punishing. And there's a game I specifically want to highlight, which is the third game in the series, Sayonara Umihara Kawase, which was released on the 3DS. And this game has like basically no runbacks whatsoever. If you die, you respawn within the level and you just do the level again. And every level has like a separate it makes every level like separate. So you do the level, you complete it, then you go back to the mission select or the map basically, and you select the next level that you unlocked based on the exit you took from the previous level. And that design actually makes it like so focused that any player that starts with that game can just hone in on getting better at the mechanics and that way overcome like the execution barrier that the game has. And that game not only has, let me just write this down as well. This would be according to me, right? This game has an execution component, which is being able to perform the swings. And there's a lot of precision to each swing because there's different elements of control, different degrees of control you can apply while you're swinging, especially with the physics system. But these are things that you can come back to after not having played the game in a long time and still be able to do extremely well as long as you've actually learned them properly. And that's something that I think a lot of teachers have in academia as like a crisis, is how to effectively be able to teach students in a way that allows them to retain information without having necessarily done or like applied these pieces of knowledge they're being given like every day of their life, right? Obviously, being able to apply it in every day of your life is an easy way to make sure that you can retain it, but it's not always practical to be able to do that. I mean, after all, when you're playing a video game as well, no one has infinite free time. Like, you're not going to be able to play the game forever, so you got to be able to play it and get through it and get better at it while you're playing it, right? And how well a game is able to do that contributes to not just like the enjoyment factor of the game, not just like the ability for the player to get through the game, but also in terms of how it also contributes to the perception of difficulty, which people seem to accrue over the course of playing the game, right? So yeah, I wanted to mention that. Do you guys have any games that can potentially fit in other sections of this matrix? Like maybe like what's a game that we can think of that is lower on the difficulty end but high in the punishment? Surely it's ripe in our minds. Barf bowls.
Real quick though, not that you mentioned it earlier.
Okay.
How Super Metroid has like the no map or whatever.
Oh,
and it
NES Metroid.
Map.
NES Metroid, yeah.
Or NES Metroid, right? I wanted to briefly touch on that because that you make a good point. Not all it's just there are some quality of life things that like your game can have or not have that is difficult or punishing and or both, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So for example, when you die respawning at the beginning of the area, that is punishing, but not necessarily difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not having a map is actually difficult and not necessarily punishing, right? There's no punishment if you don't have a map. You just lose the map, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, wait, are you talking about how there's no map in the first Metroid?
Yeah, literally no map at all. You have to like
so there's
map it out in your
no
head.
map, right?
Yeah.
That's like a quality of life thing that you just don't have. And that is difficult because now you have to memorize everything, right? You don't have to memorize, but you have to remember like the whole layout and everything, where to go, without necessarily, having that quality of life. But it's not punishing, right? Even it's like they're both two things that lack quality of life, but one is difficult and one is punishing.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, I guess it goes. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good.
I guess it goes back to how people define what makes the game difficult, right? Because
definitely.
For a game with low difficulty and punishing, it like usually some of the most punishing games are your typical roguelikes or roguelites, right? Your run literally just ends, right?
Yeah.
But like, are those games like actually difficult? Like difficult in what way? That's up to the players to decide, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah. I think that's exactly why it's like always best to do, just discuss gameplay elements that contribute to that feeling rather than like saying outright. You know, the saying outright thing is definitely like a generalization or simplification we might use, right? And this matrix, guys, is it might seem like it's contradicting what I was saying, but it's just to illustrate the point we're trying to make, right? About the perception. Because at the end of the day, like this section of this episode right now is like about perception, right? The Reddit threads are exact illustrations of perception of difficulty. Retrage added Spelunky, is that right? To the
Yes,
difficult punishing.
Spelunky, I would say, is a pretty difficult game. When it's because it's a roguelike, it's also highly punishing.
Mhm.
And there are also a lot of knowledge checks that are both in punishment and difficulty.
Wait, I thought we're naming games that are easy in the difficulty but very punishing. No.
Oh,
I
sure.
I just added it
Yeah.
on the.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I mean, for me personally, like I guess Isaac will be, you know, a game that's low in difficulty, but it's very punishing.
Yeah, sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I can attest to that as someone who's played a lot of Isaac, and did all achievements. I wouldn't even necessarily say doing all achievements is hard. In fact, doing all achievements is just a matter of like time. It's not even how much time you put in. It's literally you can just grind. Like you can always just grind. Like a lot of people do is they just hold reset on the runs until they have a good start. And that is completely viable to do. It takes forever, but you can do it and get all the achievements. And you can do it, get all the achievements, and still not know a thing about how to play the game in the proper way, right? And I say proper,
Yeah.
like obviously opinionated, but proper as in a way that allows you to win consistently, right? But that's the thing about Isaac is that everything that's possible within the game is conveyed in a way where it's just impractical to keep track of it or even discover it on your own. And it was built with like the idea that you're supposed to like share the strats with your friends and like build up like, you know, knowledge through like the idea of community. It came from that kind of time period, right? Where like indie games were like that. However, over time, as the internet as the advent of the internet has developed over time, information is so readily available that element has become more and more removed, right? So when you remove more and more of the knowledge, whatever's going to be left of the game is what entails the difficulty. In this case, Isaac has the execution, right? The execution of Isaac relates to like the shooting mechanics, relates to, basically your ability to not get hit, right? And the less you get hit, the more likely you're going to be able to win a run. But even with the fact that you have wikis available to tell you what, like literally tell you what things do that the game wouldn't tell you directly what they do, the game still is very involving in order to win consistently, right? Because you still have to be able to make decisions and know what to do with like all the knowledge that the wiki gives you. So that's the element of, all right, I can have all this knowledge, but if I'm not able to apply it, then I'm going to still have a hard time. And that's what contributes to a lot of people's viewpoint that Isaac is a hard game. And people say this especially for Repentance, because Repentance, they actually increase the shot speed of all enemies on hard mode. On normal mode, it's actually still the same original shot speed, but on hard mode, which is like the mode you have to do in order to get all the achievements in the game, the shot speed is increased, and that's like non-trivial for a lot of people. But that's to say that, yes, while this game can be seen as difficult, a lot of the things that are difficult about this game can be completely removed while still playing the game like the quote-unquote normal or intended way, which you can just literally reset over and over, right? And at the end of the day, winning consistently is not something that the game requires of you, which is why I don't think that's worth considering as a factor for saying whether this game is difficult or not. The game does not require you to play at a consistent level to win runs. Literally, the idea of beating the game for this game is just getting all achievements, or maybe maybe not even like all achievements, maybe just like winning a run. Let's just say winning a run. Anyone can win a run. It doesn't matter if you know what you're doing or not. You can literally just like play the game. As long as you know the controls, you can play the game and win a run. And because of that, like the difficulty element is probably not as present, but that doesn't make the game any less fun or less interesting, or at least for some people, right? That doesn't make it any less fun or interesting. There's still like a lot to explore in a game like this, but the punishment is still present because of its roguelite nature, and that if you had a good run and you make like a few mistakes, the run's done and you have to start over from the beginning. And that's like the punishment factor, which all roguelites tend to have. Another game I want to add to this side of the matrix is Dark Souls. Dark Souls, again, we touched on it earlier, is a game, again, gives you all the outs, right? Even if it portrays itself as difficult, it gives you all the outs, and those inherently counterbalance the otherwise difficult nature of it, which in the end, I think results in it being not difficult. But the punishment factor is still there because any mistake you make sets you back to like the bonfire or sets you back in terms of your progress, like on a boss fight. Like you have to go back and start the boss over again, potentially with an added run back. And on top of the fact that you lose all your souls when you die, and you have to go back and get them from where you died. And if you died in a dangerous spot, then you might not be able to get back to them, so you lose them forever, right? That's a very dangerous element of the game. But because the game provides all the outs within the game, and you just got to figure out how to use them, the difficulty is minimized. Now that's the thing, right? Figuring out how to use them is the element of the game. And if you're playing blind, figuring out how to use them might be non-trivial. However, the game gives you item descriptions. It's not like it doesn't tell you what they do. You just got to figure out how to use them together, or potentially if there's any synergies or like anything else. But because the game explains a lot of items within the game, like through item descriptions, that element is not as like highlighted as it would be in like a game like Isaac, where there's literally just like some joke of a description when you pick up an item, like you feel lighter, right? And it's just a bait description. Right. So now that we have these examples of games, do we have any game that is perhaps difficult but not punishing that we can place in that section? I might have misplaced Sayonara. That's actually where I meant to put that. So my bad. Everything I said about Sayonara still stands, but I meant to put it in this square. Baba is you. Interesting. All right. Who would like to go into this one? Sokoban games, basically, right?
Yeah, puzzle games in general, like the good ones are difficult and like almost never punishing, right? Because it's just the nature of the game. There's no punishment. Unless like Baba is used like, okay, after you fail a puzzle or like if you don't complete it in 5 minutes, we're gonna delete your save file, right? then this one would move up there, right?
Right.
But none of them are like that, right? They just like, here you go, here's a puzzle, figure it out, right? And so I feel like puzzle games are like the golden standard. Sometimes like good ones are like the golden standard of like, I'll give you a simple building blocks and then you have to use them creatively to figure out the solution, right? And like these are really hard. Like making a puzzle game is hard. I'll say that. I don't have the puzzle brain, but like, oh my goodness, Baba is you, Steven Sausage Roll, Sokuban, like the good ones. I've actually only played very few of them, right? But the good ones, oh my goodness, whoever creates them, their brains must be Maximos.
Yeah.
Maximo brains. Because they're actually peak, right? You sit there for like 2 hours, 3 hours, 4+ hours on one level, and when you finally get it and you like connect the dots, it's like, oh my, you feel like your brain has ascended like 10 ascension levels, right? You're like, oh, I'm maximum brain. It's building that single player ego, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh my goodness, I'm a genius, right? Even though you spent like 5 hours on it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think puzzle games are like a staple of high difficulty, low punishment, right? Single player, it's like that. The dev goal and the player goal are like literally the same in puzzle games, right? There's like no like what do you call it? No deviation, I guess, for like making the game punishing because the goals end up always lining up, right? Versus in Dark Souls, I could be like, I only want to play melee and I don't want to touch the mage stuff, right? Not dev intended. There's no dev wasn't intending that you'd only play melee. But when I play Dark Souls 3, I'm like, I'm a sword Oonga Boonga. I'm only gonna use sword, right? And that section that I struggled a lot on, Aras was like, just use a different build, just use a different build. And I'm sure if I used a different build, I wouldn't have spent 8 hours on that section, right? But I'm like, nah, my player goal is like, I want to beat the game using Oonga Boonga big sword, right?
Yeah.
Versus like the dev is like, here, beat the game, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So puzzle games, boom. Puzzle games.
Yeah. And this is a tie into what we can talk about next, which is the difficulty of being able to gather information or knowledge within a game versus what to do with that knowledge within the game. That's something we can talk about that ties directly to like how puzzle games are approached, not just by the players that play them, but by the developers that try to design them, right? A game I wanted to add, because our square here for not difficult and not punishing.
Actually, sorry to interject.
You go for it.
Looking at this chart, I personally will have a different opinion on Celeste compared to Retro Race.
Oh, I mean, me too.
To me, yeah, most precision platformers like Celeste, they are high in the difficulty chart but low in punishment, right? But in place of that spot, I would put something like your traditional platformers, like Mario, for example.
Oh, definitely.
Right?
Yeah. I was gonna actually put there Kirby. And just beyond this, like pretty much any game that's aimed at a younger audience, literally designed to be not difficult and not punishing, because evoking those sentiments in a young person, like if you're trying to like have them be able to like purchase your games when they grow older, you don't want them to have like negative memories, pretty much, which is part of why Pokemon is so successful, right? Family friendly games, yes. Like basically games that are aimed at younger audiences are so delicate and careful in how they're designed, because you have to be able to have the young person that's playing them retain their interest when they get older, and then buy the games for their children, and then those children buy the games for their children. It goes on, right? So that's a very intentional part of the way they're designed. Pokemon, unfortunately, my memories from when I was younger are very specific, so I can't really like speak too much to like the difficulty or the punishment factor. But to be fair, I think most people wouldn't disagree if we said they're neither difficult nor punishing, and they're not intended to be either. They're not only are they made to be beaten, but they're also made in a way where you don't have to interface with any of like the dirty details of how the game works, like IVs and like shinies and all of that, right? You don't have to really worry about that at all, or like what do like the Pokemon Showdown players focus on for Pokemon? Like I know competitive Pokemon is pretty intense, right? Competitive Pokemon battles. Like, do you guys know anything about that, or?
Yeah, it's like maximizing like free turns, which gets really complicated. So
Yeah. Yeah,
that's a complicated. There's like a whole meta game. Like there are certain Pokemon that are trash, but because like the meta and you know what people are going to be running, like they suddenly become good. It's like a whole fighting game. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, really? I was gonna say it's like another Yu-Gi-Oh or something.
Yeah, Pokemon Showdown has no monetary investment, right? I guess.
Oh, you mean the new? Oh, okay, yeah. I don't know about that, but I thought you were talking about like before.
And speaking of fighting games, I would put fighting games high on the punishment and difficulty scale as well. The thing about fighting games that makes them a bit difficult to evaluate, you see what I did there, is that most of them are intended to be played against a real person, right? I mean, obviously some fighting games, are built around the single player experience, so that's a separate thing. But for games that are like built around like player versus player experiences and competition, those are inherently going to have their own set of difficulties that even the developer did not necessarily account for, right? So just pretty much this goes for any competitive game. It's not even just fighting game. And yeah, Retro Raid is including that. Because not only are there elements of the opponent, you're at the mercy of the opponent you're fighting for how punishing it can, how punishing or not punishing the game can be, right? You're at the mercy of your opponent. But also the fact that if you want to if you want to be if you want to be good at the game, which is like what we can say as the equivalent of beating the game, right? Because there's no beating the game for a competitive game. If you want to be good at the game, it's going to be difficult because you have to put in the effort, right? You have to put in the repetitions. You have to be consistent. You have to know the metagame. You have to have all the knowledge. You have to be able to apply it. There's the execution side for action competitive games. There's so much that goes into it. And you're at the mercy of your opponent for how punishing it could potentially be. That's where it really starts to become like its own separate thing. But it is worth mentioning because that is something that like goes beyond like perception. That's just like inherently how it is, you know? I'm not saying it's objective. I don't want to go there, right? There's no need for that. But what I'm saying is that competitive games being punishing or difficult goes beyond like the feeble, you know, fleeting perception that we all have. That's just something that is just inherent to the discipline, which is why so many people enjoy watching competitive sport, right? Like everyone enjoys watching some good soccer, some good basketball, or everyone enjoys watching the Olympics. They're doing things that, you know, push the limits of human feats, and it takes work to be able to do it. It's not something that you can just wake up and do. Yeah. All right. Excellent. So I think we completed this matrix, unless you guys want to add any other games to it.
Yeah, this would be like the generic list, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Go deeper, maybe.
Yeah. All right. So we can make the next one, which ties into like what we're talking about next about knowledge. So the next topic we have, guys, is how gathering information within a game can contribute to a game's difficulty. And not just gathering information, but knowing what to do with the information that you've gathered, right? And the reason I mentioned gathering knowledge specifically is that a lot of games that are built around the player needing to get the knowledge themselves can have the element of difficulty trivialized to some degree if there's a wiki for the game, right? So that's where we have to like try to look at it from another angle in order to assess the difficulty, because otherwise, you know, we're just not going to go anywhere with the conversation that's supposed to be about this, right? So that's why we're incorporating that. And for these games, you can tell it's non-trivial because there are built-in mechanisms in the game for you to be able to gather information. I'm sure we've all played a game before that has an item that's like, see the stats of the enemy, right? A lot of RPGs have such an item, especially RPGs from early 2000s and late 90s, right? It's like the telescope or like the magnifying glass. It's like, see the stats of the enemy, right? And that information, the ability to gather that information usually takes a turn, right? If you play like a turn-based RPG like Final Fantasy, or recently I played Valkyrie Profile, the equivalent item consumable of that is not only a consumable that you have to like craft or like you have to buy or anything like that, but it takes a turn, a valuable turn of gameplay to be able to use it, right? And that's for something that you can just look up. So why is that something they would put in the game? Well, those are mechanisms that developers put in the game as part of the discovery, as part of the ability to gather knowledge, right? And if the ability to gather the knowledge is built within its own confines and it's like a vacuum, then they aren't taking into consideration the wiki aspect. So that's just like a design decision, right? And that's the difficulty we're trying to assess here. So that's where we're going with this. All right. How do we want to approach this to start? So here's some points I had that I had written down, and it's a little bit complex, but I'll get us started. So there's the idea of there being a knowledge pool, right? Games have a knowledge pool that the player has access to, and they have to decide how much of that knowledge pool to access at any given moment. And a knowledge pool can be very simple in that, when I say simple, you can think of it as like a tree where there's only a few rungs. And if the rungs don't extend very far, we can call it a simple knowledge pool. But if there's if there's a knowledge tree with like so many branches, and each branch has like its own branch and all of that, and it goes on like that, then the knowledge pool is a little bit more complex. And when I mean by branch, like what would be the significance of having a branch within a knowledge tree, or like why would we want to represent the knowledge pool as a tree? Is that what would the player be able to gather or infer based on something they have previously gathered? As an example, let's say the player in a game learns about weaknesses and resistances, right? What are they able to do with that information? They're able to understand that, all right, I can use the character that, has water attack, and I can use that character against an enemy that is like fire type, right? And I do more damage to them. So now what can I do with the information that I do more damage to them? I can try to take fewer turns to kill that enemy. And what can I do with the information that I can kill that enemy in fewer turns? I can try to get more experience or whatever, right? Maybe more efficient experience. What can I do with more efficient experience? I can beat the game more easily. And that's like how it goes on, right? So it's just like knowledge that you can make use of, and how far that knowledge extends, especially if it's adjacent to other mechanics in the game, contributes to the complexity of the knowledge pool. So that's the knowledge pool idea for knowledge. And there isn't just the knowledge pool, there's also the ability to gather the knowledge, right? So I mentioned this already. So the knowledge pool just exists. It's just a constant within the game, and the player has to be able to access it and work out like what's useful and what's not, right? So the ability to gather knowledge within the game is very important. There are some games where you have a blind jump, and if you're not able to safely check the blind jump, then the ability to gather that knowledge is a bit trickier than it would otherwise be. So it's something worth considering. Similarly, for a puzzle game, for puzzle games it's a little different, because a lot of puzzle games give you, actually it's worth mentioning still. A lot of puzzle games give you the ability to figure out as much knowledge as you need for a given puzzle, right? It's in a way where it's like, in order to beat the puzzle, you have to know this, right? But you can know this from what you already have seen previously. So there's no new knowledge gathering that you have to do. But there are other puzzles where you have to gather a piece of knowledge, and if you don't gather that piece of knowledge, you cannot beat the puzzle, right? And how easy or hard is it to gather that knowledge? Is it immediate? Is it intuitive? Or is it involved, right? Like that's like just as an example. And then finally, how easy or hard is it to apply the knowledge once you get it? Applying knowledge is an active step that follows along with every other component within the knowledge pool. Knowledge pool and gathering it are like exercises that are part of knowledge associated difficulty, but applying it is just as important. In fact, maybe even more important than everything else. Because at the end of the day, as I said, you can look up the knowledge that you're missing these days. You can just look at a wiki. If you don't have the knowledge, you type, I don't know, what is the knowledge I'm missing into a wiki, and then the wiki gives you the knowledge you're missing. And boom, easy like that. But some games make it such that if you're not able to apply the knowledge is as good as moot. So some examples of that being, as I mentioned before, Isaac, where if you're not able to work with the knowledge that you have from a wiki, then you're not going to be any better than you were before at playing the game. Another example, fighting games. Fighting games, wikis have loads and loads of information nowadays. If you're not able to know what to do with the information, then all you're going to know is what's plus and what's not. You're just going to have binary knowledge, kind of. And binary knowledge is like another way of what I said earlier with hard knowledge checks. Like if you didn't know like an overhead was plus, you looked at the wiki, now you know it's plus. But if you don't do anything with that information, then it's as good as moot, right? Okay. So yeah, now I think we've established the bases for what this matrix will illustrate. Anyone else want to like add anything to that?
Yeah, I think for knowledge, like Isaac's a pretty easy one where it's like a lot of the stuff is wiki, but I feel like the application is not basic, right?
Right.
Because how items synergize with each other and how they interact with not only like literally everything, the rooms, the enemies, the consumables, right? The whole D20 shenanigans and like all the infinites are like just it like signifies how much like combined application these items can have, right?
Mhm.
So like if I were to put it on a chart where I've drawn it on the whiteboard, but like you know getting the game from a wiki, like outside or inside game information, right? So I've made this. I'm not sure if that's exactly how you want it, but
No, this is great.
what
This
I've
is
drawn
it's
here is
perfect.
like outside info, inside info, and then on the bottom to up is like basic application and like complex application, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no,
So
this
I,
is perfect. This okay, this
yeah,
is
I put
mhm.
Isaac on the top left.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the x-axis, like for what I was just saying, the x-axis would probably be closest to like gathering information, and the y-axis would be closest to applying, which is exactly what you have there. I think if we had to add a third axis, the z-axis, we can say like the complexity of the knowledge pool, like the scope of it. But for now, we can just leave this matrix as is because we just want it to be easy to read, and then we can maybe have like a separate line that illustrates like complexity of knowledge pool. Um, okay, yeah. So Isaac, definitely, I can agree with that. Applying is difficult, or applying is involved. Like there's heavy application of the knowledge you get, but a lot of the knowledge you can just a lot of the knowledge you just have to view a wiki, right? So being able to gather it from in game is like impractical, right? You have to, like otherwise, like to be honest, a lot of the knowledge people have was from um data mining, right? It's funny because the devs specifically like expressed disapproval of data mining that was going on, and we're trying to find ways to like hide the information from data miners, but data miners like still found a way. And at the end of the day, they kind of caved in. And look, Isaac now has in-game item descriptions, kind of thing, right? Um,
Yeah, I'm curious. How did people find out about the hidden room technique?
yeah,
Was that was yeah?
that one is so interesting. Like the secret rooms, right? Like
Uh,
I think that one had to be data mined and like reverse, not like reverse engineered, but like reverse deduced. Like it's like basically like,
mm,
okay, what's the code for how floors are generated, and then based on that, like how are secret rooms placed in relation to like how floors are generated, and then we can like work out like the rules based on that. So technically, the secret room uh logic that people have, like for example that I have, is not 100% correct, but it's like correct like 90% of the time, right? Which is all we care about. Um, and the edge cases like are very few and far between, so it's like not a big deal. And if you're wrong, you can if you have more bombs, if you're wrong, you could just bomb the next spot that you might have thought. But
mm,
that being said, there's also the element of like, and I guess that's like an application thing still, because yeah, you can read about how secret rooms work on a wiki, but then you follow what the wiki says, and it's like, oh, that didn't work. Okay, I guess I didn't know how to apply it, right? But there's some other games where you literally just read the wiki, and then the wiki like tells you exactly how the game works, and you know how to beat it, right? And unfortunately, puzzle games that have like like oh, what's the word? It's not like randomized. It's like set. It's a set puzzle, right? So something like
oh, Circle Vines. Oh my
Sogolons, yeah,
goodness. Yes. Oh my
yeah.
goodness. No.
They're
No
fun, right? They're
thanks.
awesome,
Yeah.
but because they're like one constant solution and like one constant puzzle, you could technically just look them up and trivialize the whole thing. But if you're playing the game just like without any other outside factors, the game communicates all you need to be able to beat it. There's no like external nonsense And that's like the special thing about those games as well. On the other hand, what Retro Age put here, Mario Maker. Okay. He's gonna have to explain this one when he comes back. But okay. I'm afraid I don't understand this one. Okay, and then Celeste. The knowledge is basic. That is true. Celeste, you have the set of techniques which are not very expansive, and everything that you need to know can be figured out in game. Can be gathered within the game. You don't need to like go to a wiki to figure out a technique that's required to beat the game. Fighting games, Retro Age put in the middle of wiki and end game, which I think is accurate as well, because the application is the entirety of how fighting games work, but there still are some knowledge elements, and there still are some things that that the game tells you, and you can work out from playing the game. But there's just things like frame data, where if the game doesn't tell you the frame data, you have to just like use like external stuff, right? KOF 15 famously has frame data in quotation marks implemented, but the actuality is that it just shows you like whether it's plus or whether it's minus, and it's still useful what they tell you, because if there's one plus, it's safe, but it's plus, but it's safe for the opponent. And if there's two pluses, you know that it's really plus, meaning that it's actually the opponent like cannot interrupt it, kind of thing. And if it's minus, then you know that you're safe. And if it's minus, you know that you're punishable, kind of thing, right? But because they don't give you the actual numbers, you still got to look that up on a wiki, or you still got to like use like an external tool, which is outside of the game. But you're able to work out the important, like you're able to work at the most important part of it, which is whether it's plus or not in the context of KOF 15. And to be fair, knowing exact frame data in KOF 15 is not as important as, let's say, SF6. SF6, a lot of people will say, is a frame data game, which that's just a modern trend where a lot of fighting games, especially as fighting games have gotten more competitive, but not only that, like also as the game's designs change themselves, they've become like frame data games. We're starting to see more and more of them, and there's a certain like way you can like simplify it for yourself if you're just trying to learn the game. But when you get like as you try to get better, the knowledge starts to become a barrier. If you don't know, for example, that like Sea Viper's burning kick, like fraufraw, you can speak to this, right? Sea Viper's burning kick. If you don't know how to deal with that, that becomes more and more of a problem for you as you get further in the game, and you have to figure out a way to deal with it. And that goes beyond just like, the superficial, what's the number on it? Like you got to actually like work out solutions, and that's all application. The wiki can give you ideas. Wikis oftentimes give ideas, and ideas that are based on real world scenarios in like tournaments and stuff. But if you're not able to use those ideas in a way that fits for the situation that you're in, then it's no good. So, trying to think of any other type of game we can add on to this matrix. The game idea I had for this was turn-based RPGs. Turn-based RPGs are like not quite puzzle games, but they're also not like action games necessarily, right? And turn-based RPGs still have an expansive knowledge expansive amount of knowledge that you need to be able to gather and make use of. But I don't think it's ever in a way that's like overwhelming. So where do you think we would put turn-based RPGs on this?
It really depends on the game, right? Because
Mhm.
if it's just any percent, like just one ending, then yeah, it could be like a basic in-game thing that you can just do like on the bottom right, I would say, right? But obviously, like if you're trying to like, there are things that sometimes, oh, you gotta do this to trigger that in order to, I mean, like, Dawn of Sorrow would be a great example, right? Like, oh, you gotta wear this talisman to I mean, I'm just as an RPG. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
That that then that's something you might have to look it up. You needed a book, in fact, back then, right?
Right.
But the application itself, it's not that hard, I would say. So you could put it in the bottom left, and it depends on the game. But in general, if you're talking about like turn-based, right? Turn-based RPGs. Generally, I would say they would be on the bottom right side, right?
Yeah.
But but then there are some nuanced ones that they're like QTEs that you gotta do, like your Super Mario RPGs or that Expedition 33. Oh my goodness. Yeah, those probably will be on like the top right, I would say. Mm-hmm.
There was a game. So, oh, actually, no, this is a great example. Rune Factory. Rune Factory, like pretty much all of its systems that you actually need to like get through the game are conveyed through the game or are gatherable through the game. The knowledge pool is accessible in the game. There's some like deep systems that like aren't told within the game. For example, in Rune Factory 4, related to enhancing weapons, they give you a very surface level explanation in the like the signpost tutorial or whatever thing. There's like a sign that you can walk to, and it gives you tutorials on certain game systems, and it's very like a very brief explanation. And enhancing weapons, it doesn't tell you anything about hidden level or anything like that. It just tells you like you can imbue it with different effects basically, and you kind of have to like trial and error it out yourself. But once you and the ability to gather it is available within the game. But once you're able to do that, it's not like it's not like applying it is that difficult. Like you just have that knowledge with you, and you can do it whatever you want with it from then on. So it would probably be it's a tough one. I feel like it would be towards the bottom of the matrix, but like in the middle of wiki and in game, or maybe closer to in game. Let me just write it.
Well, I mean, I don't know, right? So, for example, the turnip sword, right? Like,
right,
you just use the level 10 turnips, right?
Mm-hmm.
To do. But what if, say, you're out of season right now, and what if, say, you don't have access to the spring fields? Like, would that still be basic at the moment? Like, I don't know.
I mean, the thing is, right? Like,
kind of hard.
You have the eternal season fields, right? Like those always give you access to the season that you desire, as long as you clear those fields first. And I guess you have to be able to know that, though. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
You're right. Okay, so I guess Rune Factory could be. It's probably like dead in the center, maybe, because there's like a balance, right? Like you don't really need complex things to beat the game, especially if you're just doing a
definitely not
arc one. But okay. So Retro Rage won't be with us for the rest of the episode for now, but don't worry guys, we will have part 2 for this, so we'll be able to have his company when we need to resume it.
This is gonna be a 10-parter.
Yeah. Let me just quickly let them know that we will have a second part. But yeah, I think Rune Factory outplace probably near the center. I'll do like right here. Just because I do think enough of the systems are available to gather relatively easy within the game, and there's some like complexities that you might have to work out from
I
other
mean,
means.
because think about it, like, okay, it's a lot of the things in there are basic, but
Mhm.
if you're adding layers and layers and layers of basic stuff, like, would you say that's more complex? Would you say the application of that is more complex, or would you still call it basic, right?
Yeah, I mean that is a good point. Like, I guess that's if you want to like go deeper, right? Because here's the thing about single player games. I'm pretty much just considering. Okay, no, actually, you're right. I mean, we do have to consider the ceiling. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you're right. Okay, yeah, I think you've convinced me on that. So, application would probably be up here.
I mean, I think like somewhere around the middle will be fine. Like maybe not like all the way up there or all the way down there. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I still think it leans. I still think it's on the right side of in-game versus
Mhm.
wiki because
Oh, for sure, for
the
sure,
the
for sure.
game gives
Yeah.
you plenty. Like honestly, way more than like a lot of RPGs would
Hmm.
give you in game.
Yeah.
And you don't need to really go out of your way to get the information. Like it's not like you have to like sometimes like for example, there's like the magnifying glass item that you could equip to like look at the stats of your field, like see how much is rotted
Uh-huh.
or like see if
Yeah.
you need to like add uh
Like fertilizers and
yeah,
whatnot. Yeah.
fertilizer, yeah. Like that I mean they give you that in game, but like you don't always have to go that far to work with what you've got in the game. And to begin with, if you really needed to go that far, you could work it out from like
Yeah. And
what's in the
it's
game.
not like you need to do that to reach like the true ending of the game, right?
Right, yeah. But it
Hmm.
would still definitely increase the scope of applying the knowledge that you have.
Hmm.
Yeah.
True.
Okay. Yeah. A game I was gonna actually say as well is Valkyrie Profile, which is a very odd RPG. It's got turn-based elements. It's got real-time elements. It's an RPG. Yeah, I said it's an RPG already. It's got turn-based elements. It's got real-time elements, but a lot of the systems in the game are super complex, and it's not even complex from just an execution stand or just a knowledge standpoint. But there's also an execution component, even though it's a turn-based game, because when you do like your characters like cast their spell or like do their ability, there's a window you have to like combo off of it. But then the enemy can recover and then block your attack if you don't time it correctly, right? So there's the execution side, which very not every turn-based RPG has such a thing. I know that Final Fantasy added action time battle at some point, but this is like even further beyond like the action time battle system of Final Fantasy that was added. Um, yeah, in a game like that, everything that you need to beat it is accessible as knowledge within the game. But there, unfortunately, that game has like some hard knowledge checks, as we call them, like basically binary, you know it or you don't, kind of thing. Where
Hmm.
in order to get the true ending, you have to fulfill all of these like very specific conditions that are just like made to like sell a strategy guide, and because those conditions completely like change the path you take in the game, that game ends up leaning more towards wiki, despite the fact that you can figure out all the basic systems within the game. It's really just like the true ending stuff that is like just hard knowledge check, and the true ending path or like route that you take within the game is so different from like the normal route. Like if you were just to get the normal ending in that game, not only is it like very easy, I would say, but it just doesn't involve a level of depth and ability to apply the knowledge that you'd gather from in game compared to like the true ending things. Um, so it's a very hard game to position in this matrix. I think I would probably put it towards like kind of in the middle of the left top left corner. So we can do Valkyrie profile like right there. Um, and the other thing about this game is the okay. So again, I mentioned execution. The execution in this game is difficult, but similar to Dark Souls, there's a lot of outs that reduce the need to be like consistent at the execution 100% of the time. This is not something that we're trying to illustrate through this matrix, but it's just something worth mentioning. There's stuff like the Dragon Slayer, there's stuff like the Beast Slayer that are effectively like outs to like the respective enemy type. So if you're fighting a dragon encounter, you just equip the Dragon Slayer and it can one shot. I think I don't remember the multiplier it gives to the damage, but it's like something absurd, like 10 times or more damage. And those are like outs, right? And the item doesn't directly say it does 10 times damage or however much damage it does, but like the minute it says like it's strong against dragons, and then the minute you use it, you can see that it is indeed strong against dragons. And those things, like that kind of knowledge is like super easily accessible within the game. But there's so much more to the game that you need to be able to have. Like you need to be able to gather and you need to be able to apply in order to get to the true ending. That just definitely skews it towards like the wiki end. But yes. So that was that was another example I had. There's some games that are just built around like hard knowledge checks and don't really have much else going on. The early Souls bosses, from what I've heard and seen, seem like they lean towards that. Like they have like basically something you need to figure out, right? Famous example, Bed of Chaos. Bed of Chaos, you hit the like the branches or whatever it is on like the two sides, and then you go into the middle and you strike it and it's done. Right? That's not the difficulty of that boss fight. The difficulty of the boss fight is the fact that the ground just caves in under you, like while you're walking around. And the state of like the boss arena is persistent between deaths. So you have to remember that the spot that you like died in is not is the no bueno anymore, basically. And that sort of thing, you have to use so many attempts to like work out. It is technically able to be worked out within the game, but looking at a wiki would trivialize that element, right? And then it comes down to the execution, which is like, are you able to do it smoothly? But because that's like one isolated encounter within Dark Souls 1, you can't really judge the rest of the game off of that, which is, and I mean, not that I was going to rank it in this matrix anyway, because I haven't played it, but it is worth pointing out, like, there are definitely like outliers even within some of these games that can skew it one way or another.
True. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, binary knowledge checks just exist in an abundance of, like, across games in general. We see this with like invisible blocks, like my favorite Metroid component, not fake blocks and breakable blocks. Basically, you have to like get your character to rub on the wall and see if you can actually walk through it, and if you can, then like boom, there you go. You know that you can do that now. And then there's also blocks that you have to destroy with a certain type of weapon, like missiles or the power bomb, or just like the regular morph ball bomb. And if you don't know it, you can't progress. The minute you know it, hopefully forever. I mean, you can potentially forget, of course, but you know, the way the devs counterbalance the fact that it's a hard knowledge check is by making sure that the player cannot progress without figuring it out, right? Which is a controversial design element for sure, but it's something that Metroid has built its design off of over time, and people have come to expect it when they play a Metroid game. But not only that, like the game works off of it in a specific way that I think allows for the exploration to be highlighted in a way that's like not done in other games. For example, in Fusion is like so linear. Oh my goodness, it is calling it a Metroidvania is like very much a stretch when it comes to that game, and not just linear, but like handholds you like nobody's business. Tells you where to go, gives you instructions. It has all these like keys and color coded doors and all of this. It's meant to be like a bite-sized Metroid experience to allow for people to ease their way into the series, but it still has all the isms, for better or for worse, that the series has rooted itself in. And that kind of thing, where you have like, you know, a block that needs to be destroyed in a specific way, or like a fake block that you can walk through, or a fake block, even worse, that is a tight that leads to a tight passage that's only passable with morph ball that's above the ground, where basically you have to jump up and then, you know, hang on the ledge and then morph ball in order to find it. Like those things are trivialized by a wiki and not necessarily readily gatherable within the game, because you have to trial and error, brute force your way in order to find those things. And they're not structured in a way that's like intuitive to how the game works in terms of its design language. And that's something we wanted to talk about for this episode. We'll probably get to it in a part 2 since we're missing some of our discussion members for the rest of this episode. But it's the idea of whether you have to trial and error to discover something, or whether the information is available through like inductive reasoning kind of thing. Back, at least back when I was in school, they separated like different types of ways to solve problems, and there was like methods like inductive reasoning, and then one of the ones that stuck out to me all the time was guess and check. Good old guess and check. Like you plug in the number into the variable and see if it equals the other thing. If it doesn't, you try a different number, you know? And my teacher, I remember my 8th grade math teacher was like, all right, what problem solving method we're going to use for this? And whenever she called on me, I always said guess and check. And she would just like, no. Like she would say like a very blunt no. That's not what you do. And I'm just like laughing to myself, right? Because while you could eventually solve any problem using guess and check and trial and error, right? You're not going to be able to solve it in an efficient way, or in a way that actually allows for you to know whether you're able to apply the knowledge outside of its specific situation or setting. Which is why video games have to be very careful in how they incorporate like binary knowledge checks, or just like knowledge checks in general, like basically pieces of knowledge that the players to work out. Because if it's just always trial and error, then that can immediately alienate or remove a certain kind of player from the fun of said game, which was my experience for Metroid Fusion, as well as Prince Waka's experience. Prince Waka's not here in this episode, but he's been mentioning to me all the time how Metroid Fusion just broke him because of all the breakable block nonsense, which is basically just brute force trial and error. And depending on whether the trial and error is associated with punishment, that can all like just pile up and add to a very miserable experience of playing the game. All these things are related, even if they're not directly tied to like inherent difficulty or something like that. Fraufraw, did you have anything to mention while I write down Metroid on this matrix?
No, I think I've just been listening, and I think these are some fair assessments.
Yep, excellent. Let me just write it down. So Metroid Fusion blocks. So that's gonna be going in the wiki tier with basic application. All right. And by the way, just as like a way to make it summative or make it easy to just classify, basically, if it's a hard knowledge check, it most likely is going to be in the lower left of this matrix. So when I say hard knowledge check, again, that means binary, like meaning you don't know it and then you know it and it becomes trivial, right? If it's like simple to apply, but can be worked out through intuitive means within the game, then that's going to be towards the lower right. And then, of course, for games that are a bit more involved in applying, but can still be worked out within the game, that would be the top right. And then for games that are very rigorous to gather info on and figure out from within the game, and involve very heavy knowledge, and involve a very heavy application of the knowledge, it's going to be in the top left. So that's just a good summary of what we've got in this matrix. All right, we can finalize the last couple of matrices, and then touch on a few points that I think fraufraw had as well for this episode, and then We'll call it from there.
No, I mean we could move my talking points to the next episode as well.
Oh, sure.
Like,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, I don't mind.
Okay. Sure. All right. So our last matrix, guys, is going to be the one for execution, which is not actually a matrix. It's just a straight line. But the reason why we wanted to include this, even though it's just a straight line, because this is a very important component to difficulty that is present in games. So let's go ahead and make this line, and similar to the other ones, we'll just have execution as the axis. Higher execution towards the right, lower towards the left. Let me just write it down. So we talked about fighting games. We can already establish that fighting games are high on this matrix. Fighting games inherently just have the real-time component, which means you got to act quickly. And, we can talk a little bit about decision-making pretty shortly after we mention the execution stuff. But basically, it's not just about like the time you have to do your action in, but it's about the intentionality, right? And we mentioned the intentionality at the beginning of the episode, where if you want to do something, you have to be able to do it and not have anything else get in the way, right? And if that exact thing you wanted to do comes out, then that's like the execution component, how easy or how hard it is to execute that thing. As an example, a lot of people complain about having to do double circles, right? Like whether it's double half circle, double quarter circle, or even double 360, a 720 motion. Traditionally, fighting games were built for the arcade, and doing these motions on a lever is not really that involved. But over time, fighting games had to make a pivot towards home consoles and subsequently personal computers, right? Like everyone plays PC nowadays. And people's method of control has evolved over time as well, along with that. People played on controllers when we moved to home consoles. And then from there, people moved to playing on keyboards, which ended up circling back to playing on hitbox, which is effectively just a keyboard. The hitbox phenomenon nowadays is pretty insane. But yeah, that's to say that methods of control have changed over time, which means that like the perception of how the execution has changed over time. So traditionally, motions that were easy to do on a lever at the arcade, such as 720 motion, are a little bit weirder to do on a keyboard or a hitbox style controller. But people have adapted. People have found ways to input them. There's like shortcuts that you can do nowadays to input the 720 quickly, and that to some degree makes the execution a bit more bearable. But there's still an execution to the making the execution bearable itself. And that's something that a lot of people miss out on, is that if the game is not itself making the execution simpler, and the players are the ones that are figuring out ways to make the execution simpler, that is still execution. That is still difficult execution that's in the game. Because the players have to find the ways to make it like possible to do on a consistent basis, or make it possible to do without having any like roadblocks. So that's something worth mentioning there. And of course, depending on how much depth there is and what the game allows you to be able to accomplish within the confines of its system, the execution can be greater or lesser. And a funny example I've always had recently, I say always, but recently. Anyway, an example I have now is Symphony of the Night with the shield dashing. It's so funny because everyone complained about like how it's like, oh, you have to like button mash and you have to alternate the buttons really fast in order to speed on this game. But you really don't. You can do it in a comfortable manner using just the default input scheme. And that aspect is not even like the most demanding execution of Symphony of the Night movement compared to something like wing smashing, which involves doing a 3/4 or 3/4 circle about every about every second, pretty much. And that can easily wear in the hands depending on whether you're using an analog stick or a D-pad. And that's like an execution component that only matters for speedruns. If you're playing the game normally, you don't have to care about doing a wing smash or doing shield dashing. You can just move in a very simple way, and there's not really execution there. And for that matter, you don't even need execution like that to beat the game in the first place. So that's not something that is worth considering for this matrix, but it's worth mentioning just for the grand scheme of the conversation. So something like if we put Iga Metroidvanias. Okay, it wouldn't be at the far low end here, but it would be like towards the low end. Like let's put it like a little bit like over here. We can have like tick marks to make sure that it's delineated more clearly. But yeah, Iga Metroidvanias probably be somewhere there. Execution needed to beat the game, not very high. If we compare that to what's an example I have? I mean, it's hard to think. I guess shmups. Shmups also have like pretty high execution because being able to dodge the bullets in like very tight patterns, extremely tough. What else would there be? Okay, would you consider rhythm games to be execution heavy, or is that just like memorization? That's like whatever.
No, I would say so. Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
It's
rhythm
both.
games.
It's both.
Right.
Yeah.
The rhythm games.
That's, I mean, if you're saying like memorization, then that applies to shmups as well, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So fighting games, shmups, rhythm games. I think NES era games would fall under this too, but not all of them. I know I put NES era games generically difficult and punishing, but that was just for our service level perception of difficulty discussion. Whereas, for this one, to be more specific, I don't think all NES era games have difficult execution, but they tend to have them. If that's a fair way to put it. Because as an example, I mean, you have experience with this for like Mega Man games, right? Like a lot of jumps that you'd have to make to like avoid the enemies like are pretty tight, right? And then also if you get hit by enough enemies, you just die. There was that I think you were playing it. There was that one Mega Man game with those like enemies that were like bouncing really fast. It's like
I think Mega Man 10.
oh yeah. Like how do you get past those without getting hit?
Oh no, it was 11. It was 11.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Like how do you get
It was
Mhm.
it was nah. They're just you just gotta figure out like where to jump. Trial and error.
Yeah, like those things are like I think those things combined with like the punishment factor of like having to start over the level and stuff definitely amplify the feeling of the execution. Because otherwise, if you didn't have the punishment there, a lot of people might think that it's not execution demanding. But
But that's the thing though. Like the game actually has a system that could make it easier, or or you can make it like harder, but you can clear it faster.
oh, okay, I see.
Mhm.
So okay, so is that like basically difficulty options then, or is it?
It's just one of the main mechanic in the game.
Oh my god. Okay. Yeah. And for those of you wondering whether we're going to talk about difficulty options, not on this episode, not at least not on this part. We're going to do a part 2 for that. I know Retro Rage had thoughts on difficulty options too, and you did as well, right? I think yeah. Okay, so other games like okay, let's think of a game that's lacking in execution. That would be like Kirby. Not the recent Kirby's, because I do think a game like Air Riders actually is a little bit trickier in execution, but that's if you want to do something that you intend to do. But the game, like Kirby Air Riders, is so built to like fight against you doing what you're trying to do or doing what you intend on doing, that like it's hard to even like explain properly whether that's execution or not. But I do think it's more execution than the average Kirby game, to be fair. But yeah, if we're talking about Kirby games in general, it would be on the low end here.
Yes, secretly dissing Aras.
Yeah, but for those of you who don't know, Aristeus, one of our folks here, had quite the difficulties getting through Kirby Superstar Ultra, and I think a lot of that was definitely interest related and not necessarily like he's like bad at the game or whatever, like skill related. But some of it was definitely.
I thought he genuinely had problems with it. Right?
Yeah, I was gonna go there. Like,
yeah.
some of the sections he definitely had trouble with, like skill issue wise. Like he died to the first boss. I forgot it's like it's the boss that throws bombs. It literally just like jumps around and throws bombs, and he died.
Yeah. Well, I guess he has trouble with contact damage in general.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, he hates contact damage. I mean, Kirby is like so built to like let you have a breeze to getting through the game that even if you're like bad at games, as long as you can like press jump and press attack and move, then you'll be able to get through the game pretty much, which is like it's not inherently a bad thing. Like that's how the games are built. But I will say like modern Kirby games are not like that as much. I mean, part of that is like difficulty options, but I think they've done okay. What modern Kirby games am I talking about specifically? Specifically Forgotten Land. I don't think Forgotten Land's hard either, don't get me wrong. And that's not something that, as we said, that's not something that we really care to like explore on a surface level. But before I get too carried away with this tangent, Forgotten Land last couple bosses definitely requires you to interface a bit more deeply with the mechanics than would be necessary at the end of some other Kirby games. And if you're interested in like the really like tougher bosses or tougher encounters, tougher execution in Kirby games, the arena and the true arena are definitely like proper challenges in the respective games. But obviously, as we've established before, within a game you can have an outlier, like as we mentioned with Dark Souls 1 and Bed of Chaos, or even Dark Souls 3 with Pontiff Sullivan, like things like that, right? Within a game you can have an outlier, so I don't think that's entirely far-fetched. Yeah, but again, Kirby Air Riders, if you really if we're talking about execution in terms of intentionality, that game is actually pretty difficult to have intentionality in. And it's just the way the game is built, like the nature of kind of having party game mechanics, but it is worth pointing that out. Okay. So yeah, we have those. I think if Waka were here, he would probably say F-Zero. I'm not going to put it on this matrix, but I'm just going to mention it because I know it's something he would put on here. I think racing games in general, depending on how, like, because I mean, racing games at the end of the day, you don't have to like be fast to beat them, but what is the point of a racing game if you're not trying to go fast, right? Like that is the point of them.
And when that's kind of on the, I would almost say on the competitive side of things. So
yeah, no, for sure. I mean, but I think I'll put like a mark near the top for racing games, because even though you can beat racing games without being like really fast, like there kind of isn't a point in playing a racing game without trying to go fast. Like it's just built in. It's similar to games that are like built to be speedrun. Like what's the game called? It's the game where you like throw cards and it's a 3D platformer. I forgot what it's called.
Cards or car?
Cards. Cards, like throwing cards, like
on the 3D platform.
Yeah. I forgot what it's called, but that game is like if you're not trying to go fast, or if you're not at least thinking a little bit about going fast, then it's like there's no point. Um, Another game that has like pretty high execution for at least for going fast would be Catherine. And the reason I mentioned Catherine specifically is because it's played competitively.
Yeah.
The thing about Catherine though is that if you're playing the single player game, you don't need to necessarily do that. So just gonna mark him this as well though. Honorary mention. And then a lot of the older arcade games, like not fighting games, but like beat 'em ups or like Metal Slug. Like Metal Slug, okay. So technically you can credit feed for these older arcade games, right? Which is why it's kind of difficult to point them out. But the more you credit feed, like you're just gonna lose money, right? So what if you're trying not to lose money? Then a lot of these arcade games suddenly become like pretty intense in execution because you have to like actually get through all the loads of enemies in the levels. You have to engage with the mechanics without dying and stuff. And even in a game like Metal Slug, that's pretty tough. I would say that's tough due to execution for said games, but it's hard to rank them as high as competitive games or even other arcade games. Or sorry, it's hard to rank them as high as competitive games or other games where it's demanded of you to like go fast and innately, because like arcade games just as like a generic like type of game can be credit fed. So that's like their built-in out basically. It's harder to say the same thing for like other ones. I guess you could say that for shmups as well. So if I had to like tie it together, like arcade games, but we could tie together like shmups with that. But if we're not considering credit feeding, then arcade games would go higher for sure. I think that covers most of the real-time games, because like at the end of the day, execution doesn't have to relate to just real-time games, but it's going to be most noticeable when you're playing a game that requires like making an action in real time, because there are some games that are not real time but like still have the element of intentionality, and that intentionality can exist. So let me just write that down, like text box. Come on. Bruh.
No, it just does that. Yeah.
Oh,
You
that's
have to type it. Yeah.
okay. Oh, it's not typing. What?
It should be. You gotta click in between the.
Okay, let me try. Yeah, what? Okay, I don't know why it's not working. Oh, it made a billion text box. Okay. I see. Oh, it's just tiny though.
Yeah, and you just change the font, like change
Okay.
it to like 50, 60 years or something. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. All right, so yeah, intentionality doesn't have to be related to execution, and can be related to decision making or application of knowledge. Yeah, so like basically, like execution is what I want to directly associate with like the inputs or like what you're pressing, right? But intentionality is also tied to it and also ties itself to like other components we've talked about. So it's worth pointing that out. And if you're to beat a game, but the game doesn't require you to have really like intentionality, it's like, oh, oops, I didn't mean to do that, but then it still works out. Like, and it still produces the outcome you wanted, or you don't get punished very heavily, then said game could probably be seen as by a lot of people as less difficult. But the punishment component, while being tied to intentionality to some degree, is not necessarily related in the same way as intentionality relates to like, you know, how you applied the knowledge or how you actually like executed the input. Yeah, it's like a I think that's the problem with like just adding punishment to the picture in this discussion, because it's just inherently like it's just inherently like feeling based. If it just feels like so subjective, like how people would view it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like knowledge is something that a game just has, whether you view it or not. Execution, pressing something and it producing like what you pressed, is just inherent to the game. Punishment is like so perception oriented, because I mean, obviously the devs put in whatever they put in the game with their desire to like, you know, punish the player or not. But then the player can see something as punishment that the dev didn't even see as punishment, or the player similarly can see something as like nothing that the dev intended to be punishing. Like example I can think of right now is actually from a recent thread. I'll pull up the thread along with okay, so yeah, we're gonna talk about this thread, but there was another thread. Okay, one moment, I have to obscure the screen before pulling it up. Okay, so there was a thread like just literally over the last night, and a lot of people didn't like this thread or this post, but basically, if we have the original save room system where when you die you lose all your progress, compared to what a lot of Metroidvanias have right now, which is like the corpse run, I personally don't see the losing all your progress when you die as punishment, even though it could be intended as punishment by the developer. But I think part of why I don't see it as punishment is because I'm like so like used to it from playing. It's like like if you've played a lot of games like from before like the 2010s, like it's very common, and it doesn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. It's like, oh yeah, this is pretty normal. But it probably still ties into punishment because it's like it's under the same umbrella. It's like related. But basically, this person was saying like we should have corpse running instead of the save room system where you lose all your progress after you die since the last save. And corpse running is better than the save room system. And I'm like, huh. Like, I don't agree, but I think I understood how I viewed the save room system after reading this post. I'm like, wow, I don't see it as like a problem at all. I don't see it as a punishment at all. So I wrote a comment on this thread saying that corpse running doesn't add anything to what Metroidvanias focus on, which is exploration. What you're saying is valid for a game that's linear, as the player only has one path to go on anyway. So they'll always be retreading the path back to the corpse. But in Metroidvanias, there usually should be multiple open routes, and corpse runs discourage you from venturing them until you can recover your corpse and make it back from the danger zone safely, which is a lot of unnecessary manual traversal. But if dying resets your progress since your last save, you can still decide to venture another path if the path you died on was too dangerous. There's no time waste there since you gained valuable info. And I was thinking about this again as I woke up, because yeah, like it really does. It really just goes to show how much punishment is tied to just perception, as opposed to anything that's like built in the game by the devs as their intention. I mean, obviously, save room system is just a fact of a game. Like if it's in the game, it's just a fact. but whether it's intended as punishment or not is just like perception oriented, right? Yeah, that was just like a thought I had, and it just makes it just makes me realize more and more like how loaded of a topic this is, to be honest.
Yeah.
So the other thread I was gonna point out for this episode, guys, is one that I made a month ago. And basically for a long time, and as I mentioned with the purpose of this episode, for a long time I was just bothered by how people treated the difficulty discussion, especially nowadays. People make it seem like games, these like Metroidvanias these days, are so hard. And okay, first of all, I disagree, right? Like that's just a subjective feeling I have. But beyond that, I feel like it's just a lack of focus. And I wanted people to focus more on the aspects that make it difficult, as is the point I've been stressing this whole episode. I don't want to read like this whole post aloud, but I'll post a link to it in the description of the VOD for the podcast episode for those of you that want to take a look at it. And let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, do you think that the approach that I've suggested in this post is appropriate, or is it necessary, or is it something that is implied and is not really needed to be explicit? A lot of people in the comments had interesting thoughts. Someone did say that like it's well understood already and that you don't need to be explicit. And then they ended up saying that like, I think you just like discussing stuff as an end unto itself, which not only is spot on, but also like yeah, I do. And that's exactly why I think people should discuss this with more precision. But yeah, anyway, let me know what you think. If you're watching, if you're listening, leave a comment saying whether you think this approach requires change, or do you think people saying this game is difficult or not is all that needs to be said. Okay. All right, so I think we've finished up our last matrix there. Fraufraw, did you have anything else that you wanted to tie in for any of these charts? Looking like
No, they look good.
Okay.
Yeah, I look forward to the next part to part two, because
Mhm.
everyone will be back, and you know it'll be fun.
Yeah.
Wait,
Yeah.
so Moxie just left, right?
Yeah, he had to go. He DM'd me saying he had
Oh,
to go.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and apologies, folks. We couldn't have everyone stay for the entirety of it, but I think we got quality discussion during the time we did have. And given that we've not even touched on most of what we wanted to talk about, and we still somehow reached like 2 hours and 47 minutes of talking, it's pretty crazy. It goes to show how much there is to talk about for this. All right. Well, I think we can give a synthesis and then close it out. That sounds good. So what we talked about here today, guys, we tried to outline exactly what difficulty is, like just on a fundamental level, on a philosophical level. And the conclusion we came to is that difficulty ties in, the execution required, the knowledge that is associated with the task you're performing, the effort that it takes, the mental stack that is associated with it, the decision making, which we didn't get to, but don't worry, we can touch on that in a future episode, or in the next part, really. And how all this difficulty relates to the perception that people build around difficulty in the video games, and how that perception ties to the punishment factor that the games have, how much their interest is maintained, how frustrating and tedious the games can be with how they take the player through the journey of the game. And we tried to illustrate this through some examples that we've played before. These different matrices illustrate, the relationship between the punishment and the difficulty of the game, just on a very surface level, and how games have like different knowledge pools and knowledge bases that allow for illustrating the level of depth that the game has, and if that depth is demanded of the player in order to get through the game. And we illustrated that through the ability to ability to gather the knowledge from the game or not, versus the ability to apply the knowledge that you gather. And finally, we tried to illustrate the execution component, which is involving like just the ability to input or execute. I said execute for execution. The ability to input or register whatever you're trying to, whatever action you want to do within a game. And if it's strenuous versus whether it's not very involving, doesn't require that much practice, doesn't require that much effort, like just physically, can determine how much execution there is related to the game. And usually this applies for real-time games. I guess we can touch on decision-making component a little bit because that is something that we want to talk about more in part 2 for the difficulty discussion. But I think it's worth mentioning a little bit more for the synthesis. Decision-making, like it is directly tied to ability to apply the knowledge you make. But sometimes the decision you make, there isn't like a lot of games, like single-player games especially, you apply the knowledge in one way, and like that's sufficient to get through the game, and you have to like figure out how to apply it. But there are some games where decision making, there's not like one right way to do it, and however you do it can lead to a different outcome that you then again have to decide from there how you want to do things. And if you're not able to like adjust based on the outcome that was different from like the quote unquote dev intended outcome, which is the point that Retro Rage wanted to bring up for this podcast episode, then we'll have him bring it up for part 2. Then the decision making for said game is going to be a lot more involving, more taxing, more brutal in terms of the difficulty. So that's something that we see especially in like turn-based games, but it can apply really for any game. It doesn't have to be just for turn-based games. We see it in a game like Isaac. We see it in fighting games all the time. We can even see it in certain puzzle platformers. Like Umi Harakawa says, it's not directly a puzzle platformer, but it is a game where you have to like make split-second decisions based on the execution that you do. A game like normal platformers don't really have that decision-making element as much. You just do it in one way and you get through it. And sure, you can do the levels in multiple ways, but those multiple ways don't lead to different outcomes. There's pretty much just one outcome. When those multiple ways can lead to different outcomes and those lead to different outcomes themselves, that's where it becomes like a lot more to handle as far as decision-making difficulty is concerned. But again, we can explore this further in part number 2. So yeah, and then last thing we talked about as well was, again, we tied in intentionality to what we discussed at the beginning of the episode, where if there's something that you are wanting to do and you are able to do it with either what you know or with what you're able to perform, then the intentionality can either increase or decrease the difficulty of the game. And depending on the nature of the game, that type of intentionality may or may not be required to beat it. So we're talking about like, again, Kirby Air Riders. The intentionality is difficult, but you don't actually need intentionality to be able to get through the game or to be able to beat people. So yeah, and that tends to be a feature of party games in general. Like, yes, you can get good at a party game, but getting good at a party game won't produce results that allow for you to meaningfully overtake people that didn't get good at it, which is like the whole point of them. Yeah. All right. So, Fraufraw, did you have anything else that was missed in that synthesis?
No, I think it was pretty well put.
All right, cool. Yeah.
Nothing, yeah.
All right. Excellent. So yeah, those of you that listened in, those of you that watched, thank you very, very much for watching. We'll be back with this discussion on difficulty in video games for part number 2 at some point soon. Just make sure to subscribe, make sure to keep up the notifications so that you'll know exactly when that will happen and so that you don't miss any future episodes that we do. This has been episode 2 of Drivers Discourse on difficulty in video games from K-Drive and from fraufraw. Thanks for watching, everyone. Catch you next time. And also, of course, from Moxie and Retrage. See you all next time.
Later.